Ready to start?
Good evening. I'll call the Wenham FINCOM meeting to order at 6:42.
That's great.
Just a sec.
Pardon me?
I hate Siri. Sorry. It's just Siri. Don't pay any attention.
Okay. I'll call the Wenham Board of Selectmen meeting to order. All in favor? Aye. We'll share it. This apparently goes out to...
Yeah, it's going to be really hard. I can't even hear you from here, Jack.
There's
Hello?
no.
Hello?
Yeah, and then there's...
1, 2, 3, 8, 9, 10? No. Not my fault. We have a communication problem again. Can you hear me now, Catherine?
Yes. If you
That's
talk
good.
right into the mic, I guess.
I was talking to the mic all along. We had a little technical difficulty, as they say. Okay. Let's go.
Okay, thank you. So tonight we have a couple of handouts for you. First is our capital plan. This is the one that goes horizontal. And then this is our budget roll-up, which we still use the same 3% for the schools, although we know their number now. That's what we started with. So, you know, the purpose of tonight is really, I think, getting our finalized numbers. So with that, we have a, on the capital side, on our buckets of funding categories, on the operating budget, which is Article 1. Sorry. So we have $400,351 less the Hamilton assessments, which is $61,380, leaves us the net of $338,971. And as we heard from staff and department heads, that most of that is reoccurring leases that we're pretty much committed to paying those bills. The second grouping of funds, it's a revolving fund. That's the $25,000 from the iron rail to pay back that the ban. The next group is Chapter 90. That's the $150,000 that we received from the state. The water fund is $185,000 that they're looking for, and I have a little comment on that with Selectmen review, because one of the items that the water department has requested, that FINCOM had the opportunity of seeing the new number on the SCADA system, went from 50,000 to 150,000. So the Selectmen hadn't had the opportunity to see that. So tonight, it's just even though FINCOM approved it, and originally the Board of Selectmen approved it, I think it's new information that they should be aware of. And free cash, I have a question mark, because we have really very few items, I think, left for decision-making purposes by the boards. So here are, in looking at the capital plan, the items that we have in question are up listed on the board. It's the comp and class study, master plan, rifles, ambulance, the scatter system, and then anything other. I can tell you that for the comp and class study, I'd like to withdraw that one, because since we just recently were asked to participate in a grant with Manchester, and it's a peer review grant of there's about 10 North Shore communities, and what the objective is to look at operations, staffing, so we can have comparative analysis to make budget decisions. So that's including staffing. So I'm hoping that that gets us to where we can use those numbers. And, you know, if not, we could always revisit this next year, but, you know, I don't see, you know, spending $15,000 if we have an opportunity to see and get this, it's costing us $0 to be part of it.
For the viewing audience, maybe you can tell them what SCADA stands for? SCADA?
Chris, do you have that, the quote? I don't know if it's an acronym for something or if it's just the name.
It must be.
Yeah, the SCADA is it's the water program that basically talks to all of the wells and looks at the levels of the chemicals and how it's pumping. So right now, the reason why he's looking for scatter is because all that works with copper lines. And copper's going away, Verizon has told us, so.
It's a computer enhancement program for the water department.
Right.
I don't think anyone would know that by looking at those lists.
Yeah, no.
I'm just asking you to
Right.
explain it.
Yes. Yes, and it's all based on, assuming that the copper goes away. All right, so with that,
John knew all about that, but okay.
No, I'm glad you asked, Jack.
so I don't know if you want to just go through these highlighted items that were deferred, or, so the first one being, and actually I have it up here, I have the spreadsheet up here, oh, it's too small. First one is right there, which would be the master plan at $100,000. These are in question. $15,000 for, well, we took that out, the class and copper, at least that's my recommendation. The ambulance, the fire chief has withdrawn the ambulance. He's working on some other alternatives for that. And just to discuss the SCADA system upgrade and let the selectmen know. So those are the 4 items. I don't know.
And the rifles.
Oh, and the rifles. And the reason why the rifles are up there, too, is when the chief first came to the selectmen actually asked him if he could split those up over a period of 2 years. He thought that he could, didn't really have an answer, but he since can. And so that dollar amount is split half this year and then half next year. So 5, I believe it's 5.
That's been presented to the FINCOM already.
And it's been presented to the FINCOM.
BOS.
Right. So this is a little bit new information, although I think BOS asked that.
So that's been cut in half, you said,
Half and half, so he'll get 5 rifles this year,
for this budget season, half for
5 next year.
Okay.
5 repurposed rifles. They have 10. They're only going to
Trade them up.
do whatever they're going to do with them.
Is it 5 now and 10? I thought it was 7 and 7.
$7,000, but 5 rifles.
It's
5 rifles.
14,000 for 10,
Yeah,
7,000 for 5. So just to step back a little bit.
Sure.
So we've got the list of capital items, and on your bulleted list, which had 5 items, I think, right? Minus the compensation study. Was it 6 minus that to yield 5?
I think
If you don't
then
mind.
there was just other items, so.
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
Oh, other items,
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, and the ambulance came off because the chief withdrew it.
Understood. So these are capital only, so like SCADA, for example, is not, oh, I apologize. It is there, but it doesn't say deferred. I went through deferred, and it's blank. Got it.
Right, it's highlighted.
Okay.
That
so-
would be
So
highlighted.
each of these is on the spreadsheet?
Yes.
Sorry. Thanks for that clarification.
Yeah, and it's not deferred because the selectmen originally approved them, but at a different number.
Revisiting potentially, or something like that. They opted to say yay or nay?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks. So should we just go through in order, starting with what, the master plan, since it's next on the list after you indicated you're deferring the request for the comp study?
Yes.
Okay. I'm talking, I can keep talking. I can attempt to kind of summarize the FinCom's view on it, just to kind of bring us back to where we were maybe a week or 2 ago, and just to kind of open it up, and
Great.
others will chime in. Master plan, so I think, generally speaking, meaningful support for the move to enact, to go after, to have help with a master plan for the town of Wenham. With the thinking that it'll help set the long-term strategic vision, solidify it for when there are opportunities for development, those which may change, those which are episodic in nature and don't really come up all that often. So we obviously need to be nimble and react to those as time goes. Take, for example, Wenham Pines, right? Town had right of first refusal on that, paid for an appraisal, opted not to purchase it, and it's being developed. Not stating that's right or wrong, just saying that's like kind of an example of, something that presumably a master plan would kind of help to, guide our course of action, at least give us a starting point so that we're not starting from scratch. The number is too steep, we feel, for affordability in FY21, which is why we deferred any sort of yes otherwise consistent with our kind of support for this type of plan until this evening. Just felt like it's too big a number with too much of a revenue levy limit crunch right now to say yes to.
Yeah, and can I just add, anything that is not approved of these items, that will increase the use of free cash, which will reduce the deficit.
Can I ask a question on the master plan? Does it have to be an all or nothing? In other words, can you start it with some level of funding versus 100K at a pop? I mean, ask for other, because a lot of items were, I mean, there's other committees that have done a lot of work already, so a lot of it is you're pulling things together. So I'm just asking as an alternative, that's all. You know my feelings about.
Yeah. Good question. I've never done it that way. You know, I don't know, it's a good question. It depends on if the company that want to bid would do progress payments and at what point we're at. So we'd have to start it towards an end of a fiscal year. And then you're finishing it up in the summer, which is a less ideal time when you're looking for community involvement in the master plan. A lot of people go away for the summer. So generally, when they do the real community outreach, it happens in the fall when people are back, the kids are back to school, and everybody's back in their normal routines, and the weather's not as nice. It's nice to be indoors.
So the answer is maybe.
You know, I got it as a no. As a no.
Yeah, I said no slash maybe, yeah.
Yeah, it's like,
The,
You got it right.
the letters here are somewhat compelling, and they talk to, let's see, of the work that has already been done. And Joe Hostler, on the, just for example, of the Affordable Housing Trust, speaks to the plans that have been put in place already. And getting back to Mike's statement, could these plans that exist kind of begun with some consultation assistance be rolled up into a beginning study? Because these plans are, let's see, town's open space and recreation, affordable housing, Wenham Connects, town's hazard mitigation plan. They're all completed in 19 and 18. So we got some current information. And so my question is, a little bit on Mike's, is could we take that, give it to a consultant at some reduced cost and possibly push it along? Is that a
Can I just make a
Possibility.
comment to that, Jim? Because I've been following this master plan thing, and I've always been a proponent for it, although I'm really seeing the issue with the dollars. But the idea of a master plan is to pull all of those, is to have an overarching group that pulls all of those silo kind of reports together.
Right.
And I don't think it's the kind of thing that we have the capacity to do in-house. I think it can inform a consultant, but I don't think the fact that we have the 3 plans does anything other than provide up-to-date data that our staff wouldn't have to start gathering, or we wouldn't be paying a consultant to gather. And I also don't think we can, from a procurement point of view, I'm not sure that it is wise to do a plan like this over, sort of over fiscal years. So I feel like it's a yes or a no for next year, and I'm not going to say whether I think it's a yes or a no. I've been saying all along, we've got these great plans now, and we're hopefully working on them, but we're not talking to each other, the groups. This is what that does. So, anyway, that's my 2 cents on that.
I have a comment. So I've been on the Board of Selectmen for almost 7 years, and many years before that in the FINCOM. I never recall a meeting at the FINCOM, and certainly the Board of Selectmen, where an agenda item was, by the way, the master plan called for X, the existing master plan, or the one, and we should discuss that. I've never heard a single agenda item ever in my career referring to the previous master plan. So,
Was written 1960.
oh, I wasn't born then. Okay, I got it.
That expired in 1980, is that correct? Yeah. So you're right. You're right on that, Jack.
Thank you for that. And how did that plan work out, by the way?
I'd say about half of this stuff, because I just read it,
Yeah.
about half.
Oh, good for you.
Thank you for asking for it. I got to
About
read it,
half
too.
of it was actually implemented, which was quite surprising, but that was a long time ago.
Which parts do you recall it was actually implemented?
They were, just trying to remember, the cemetery.
We
So
didn't
you
have
got
a
new
cemetery
temporary-
before?
You got a new cemetery.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
Yeah, you got iron rail. You had, what was all the other stuff? You had some conservation, you had some land. You sold some land up on Cedar Street, so there was a whole planning process for that to add more development there. Things
Cedar
of that
Street.
nature.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good for you, Mike.
I have a comment and a question. I think it's a wise decision to make and an investment to make in general to strategically move forward with how you use land and space in our town. And I think it's an even wiser investment to make to help when you have increasingly limited resources and increasing demands on them. So one thing that we talked about in the Finance and Advisory Committee meeting is in terms of economic development, which I know is, we don't have an economic development plan, which this would serve, but if we make a $100,000 investment in a master plan, does anyone have any sense of invest $100,000 now and it may yield, A, B, or C economic development projects that would then yield more than $100,000 investment?
Excellent point.
Tony has the answer.
So are we allowed to accept question or responses from?
No, go ahead.
Yes, thank you.
So Ann Weeks here. I'm the chairman of the planning board. I'm also a registered planner and worked for the city and county of Durham, North Carolina for a long period of time during a period of enormous rapid growth. And because there was a master plan, there was a way to direct the growth. And there was also a way to attract the growth, attract the development. Right now, we don't have...
I don't think your mic is on. Maybe we can get
Oh,
that
it's
young fellow
green.
back there
It's
to...
green. I don't know. It's on. I can see it.
The viewers can...
The point being, I'll just make 3 quick points, and I actually have to go run a public meeting. Parts of this plan are done, so the $100,000 is the amount that you would pay for wrapping it together and doing the pieces that are missing, including the economic development piece and some other pieces. If you wait, if you defer the investment, it's going to cost a lot more, both because money is going to be worth less and because you won't have the recently completed pieces with all of that research there so that you can just take those and wrap them in. If you wait, then you'll have to redo those pieces, and that's a cost to the town as well. So that's one point. 2 is Wenham needs a vision for the future in order to attract the kind of economic development that I think everybody in this town believes we need in order to support our vision of the future, which includes keeping the feel of our community while not relying quite so much on the property tax. So that's the second item. Without a plan, it's very hard to attract development because people don't know what you want. And third, right now we're leaving money on the table. So I'm the chairman of the planning board, but I also sit on the Open Space and Recreation Committee, and staff applied for a grant to do some bike lane striping from the state. One of the main factors why that why we didn't receive that grant is we don't have a master plan. So I think we're leaving money on the table. So those are the 3 major points I wanted to make. I can answer questions. I think the question out there was, can you say if you invest this now, you'll get twice as much later? I mean, that's going to vary town to town. but my experience in the past has been, it's a lot easier for staff to sit down and talk to developers about where things should be when there's been a town-sanctioned plan that says this is where things should be, and we support it. So, for what that's worth, I don't think you can do the economic, the you know, nitty-gritty analysis, and perhaps some of the $100,000 that you would spend would be spent to do that kind of work. You know, if you did this, then that. But, so, anyway,
Okay.
thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak. I'm going to fly. Ernest Ashley was here to speak for the Open Space Committee and had to leave. We have a, Open Space also has a letter in the packet.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff?
Thank you, Ann.
Tony
Good luck.
Fahari.
Thank you.
I'm Chair of the Board of Zoning Appeals. And I'd certainly like to respond to the question that was asked, which is, are we leaving money on the table? Probably we are, both with respect to grant money and to having a better handle on what we might be doing, what we should be doing with some of the commercially zoned property that there is in town right now. But I'd go a step further, that separate from the economic benefits, we're also sort of just reacting to things like a 40B project, you know, which is one of the things that the Board of Zoning Appeals is looking at right now. And that's something else that we ought to be doing. And the master plan process certainly does include input from the selectmen, and from some of the reports that have already been done, but it also brings the community involved as well, so we get some more input in terms of what it is that the community is willing to live with and willing to be interested in with regard to changes in the zoning map, perhaps, and a variety of other things that would make sense. So it's really, I mean, the town's got a good start right now with things like the open space, plan that's been put together in affordable housing. And I think, as Jim mentioned, part of this is pulling all of that together, getting more input from the town, and then trying to figure out, what's happened since 1960, when the last master plan was done, and what should be done at least over the next 20 years. And there won't be complete agreement on it by any stretch of the imagination, but at least it will start talking about issues like commercial zoning, like some of the things that might happen in the middle of town over the next decade or so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All said.
Does it, what is, no, it's really loud. What is the time frame for the master plan envisioned? Is it like a 10-year, 20-year? Does anyone know? 40-year?
In terms of its, like, validity?
Yeah.
Or usability?
Yes, or like, we'll project out, our last one was from 1960.
To 80,
Yeah.
60 to 80.
So is a 20-year time frame? Is this roughly 20 years, 10 years?
I'm trying to think what was.
It depends.
I don't,
Well, it's not 60.
No, it was
I mean, I don't know that,
Around
between
20?
10 and 20.
Okay.
I think elements of it would probably have a shelf life that would be much longer than a stated range, and others might, because of some changes and
Right, yeah.
dynamics with the town, you might find they're less applicable than,
Okay.
maybe even 5 years. But I don't know enough
Curious.
about master plans to know what they are, but.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to make a comment, if I could. Your point, I think, is very well taken by me, at least, that what is the return on the investment? Well, I'm going to be even more fundamental than that. What appetite does the town of Wenham have to actually implement any plan that would come along? And some examples of things that have not happened and have cost us dearly are the Mullen property, for example. We lost $250,000 up there because we lost the opportunity numerous times, having worked very closely with Jim Mullen, myself, to bring in an investment that would develop that property to something that would put new tax revenues into our pockets. Does Wenham actually have an appetite to change the open space environment and rural character of this community? Or are they going to be satisfied with what we have, and we just need to start thinking about reducing our cost of operation, be it schools or DPW or fire or whatever? I've been watching this for 15 years now, and I'm not seeing any support for economic development. And I personally went into the Open Space and Economic Development program when I first ran in '06, '07. And I thought for sure there would be a good balance and understanding that, okay, you want open space, it's going to have a cost to it. But if you're not prepared to address that cost, then let's not spend $100,000 that we don't have today and think about, is there, again, truly an appetite?
I have a comment to make. Obviously, a 60-year-old master plan is quite old and out of date. And that, should we have a master plan? Sure. And that, for some of the reasons Tony's already described. However, we're way over the levy limit, way over the levy limit. The schools have just announced last night, I believe, that they want a 9.5% increase from us. So that we have to go to the taxpayers and tell them we've tried to do our best to minimize our expenditure increase for next year. And a master plan is a desirable thing to have, I think. However, is it a critical thing to have next year? I don't think so. Is it a desirable thing to have? Absolutely, for many of the reasons that Tony just said. So I'm looking for ways to reduce our expenditure increase of the town, and a $100,000 master plan would be right at the top of my list of something that's nice to have, desirable to have, but not critical to have for next year. Anyway.
And I agree with you, Jack, that it's a smart way to do any business, is to do it with a plan. But if it's going to sit on a shelf and just collect dust, we've seen too many of those things happen.
So I would like to get more of a sense from the Board of Selectmen and anyone else on this.
There's only 3 of us, 2 of us already spoken, so.
Well, and anyone else at the table, on what you think the appetite for economic development may or may not be. I guess I'm thinking with the increased budget pressures that there may be more of a willingness to engage in some reasonable, thoughtful economic development to try to get another source of revenue besides residential property taxes, but that's an assumption I'm making, and I'm just curious with, the history of the people in the room and at the table, if you think even with increased budget pressures, there still may not be an appetite for economic development.
I think the master plan would help us answer that question.
Oh.
It's in a circular kind of
Yes,
argument.
yeah.
Because it doesn't appear, it appears as if folks in town want the status quo in the terms of, oh, they like open space, they like this. That there's not, anything that would be done would be difficult to do, but I think I don't know if there's an appetite in the community for economic development. That would be, I hope, a question. Not only is there an appetite for it, but what kind of development would the community be interested in? So that's just my comment.
I think there is an appetite. Out of sight, out of mind would be a good definition for economic development and commercial development in Wenham, from what I can hear from constituents who talk to me. So long as we can't see it, that's fine.
Okay.
If I could just make one last comment before I go. One way or the other, I mean, the Open Space Committee did a wonderful job of identifying every single parcel of land in the town which is theoretically available to be open space or to be developed. Things are going to happen with, we could identify the Streeter property, the Haley property, to a variety of other large properties. Something's going to happen with those properties, and the town may have some input in it or may not, depending on, I mean, the town had an opportunity with regard to the golf course, for example, to make a judgment not to purchase it. No reason to second guess that, to be sure, but it's not as though we can make, if we want more open space or keep the open space, there's no guarantee we will be able to protect that, because Private development eventually will in one way or another control it, and it could turn into individual, single-family house lots that just increase the expenses in schools and a variety of things of that sort, or something else could happen. So it's my only comment that if we make the decision to stand still, it doesn't mean we can stand still, so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tony. How do you want to proceed then, Alex?
So, just another comment. I think that the comments that Tony and Ann made are very valid in Carrie's questions. There's the eventuality of some of these things happening with respect to potential chapter properties that might be development opportunities. I think we need to be careful of discounting entirely the work that's been done thus far, that was just referenced by the Open Space Committee, if I have that correct, to have inventoried and described and sort of teed up this important information to the town, and assuming that it's of no value or it can go nowhere unless we have take the next step of consulting to develop a formal master plan. We rely heavily on the boards and committees and town employees to make these decisions all the time anyway, and engaging with the public and residents is really difficult, and I assume that's what the consultant would help us do. But I do want to be careful that we don't fall into the trap of thinking that the opportunity cost of not having a master plan today is costing us a specific tangible amount of revenue, because we just don't know. And I've heard the comment mentioned that we have a revenue problem. And I think naturally you would point to something like a master plan to help solve that, which it might very well longer term, but we don't know for sure. And the revenue problem per se is that we don't have enough of it for our given expenses. So you could flip that on its head and say we need to control expenses. And I think the master plan needs to be viewed in isolation in its own merits, and not as a way of solving next year's override, jumping way ahead. Because I think there might be a tendency for people to view it as a panacea or something that we're punting on that's costing us revenue in years 0, 1, 2, 3, which it might, but we just don't know that. We do know the cost, and we do know the significant imbalance to the budget right now that we're facing, which is why I feel the timing outweighs the benefits that I personally believe are inherent in a master plan, which have been well articulated tonight by those who know a whole lot more than I do about them.
Yeah.
So for me, it's personally a timing thing, and I'll stop there.
Do we vote on it, or?
To Jack's question as to how we proceed, that likely is where we'd end up, but if there are other comments.
No, I think I'd just like to revisit the Wenham Pines thing. So we had a public hearing when the property came available, and that the Board of Selectmen conducted the hearing, and that in Bucher, what did we conduct it? Anyway.
Oh, right here.
Right here.
That's
and so
right.
that it was well-attended, 80, 90 people, and that we previously solicited input from people, the schools, the rec department, everybody, and no one had a single idea of what we could use the property for. However, we were encouraged to buy it anyway and continue to run the golf course. And that none of us have, unless Catherine has got a hidden talent she hadn't shared with me, none of us have a talent of running golf courses or even playing golf. And so that we ended up with Wenham Pines as a hopefully a revenue-producing thing for the town. And that, the process didn't work. That's what I'm saying. Everyone wanted us to preserve the property, but no one had any idea what we're going to do with the property. And so to give up hopefully the revenue we're going to generate for the town from this Wenham Pines thing is, we need that revenue. Maybe that's not here nor there. Anyway, maybe we should proceed to a vote. I think most of us know what we're going to vote. Maybe the FINCOM wants to go first.
Sure.
Unless you have more.
No, I don't.
The members.
So procedurally, we just establish separate motions, right? Each vote independently on them, I guess, is that how we go?
Because the warrant article is going to show FINCOM voted X, Selectmen voted Y, or X.
Yeah, and this, I guess, to the extent it were a separate article, but I guess we're just talking about whether or not we include it in the overall budget for capital, so I think it's
Okay.
not even like a
Sure.
recommendation to town, because it,
Right,
unless I'm
agreed,
incorrect.
agreed.
So, I move that Wenham FinCom support the, I'll establish the motion in the affirmative, support the expenditure, the inclusion of $100,000 for the capital plan for the master plan in the FY21 budget.
Second.
Thank you, Gary. All in favor? All opposed? Thank you. And that's where we're at.
And what was the vote, by the way?
We're opposed 3-1.
Okay. Selectmen, same thing?
So the motion is to approve.
Do we
the-
include, as-
Include
as-
the expenditure in, of
The budget and not
$100,000 in the.
including, just like Alex,
Better wording,
I-
Catherine had.
I'll take that wording, it's good
Is
enough.
that a motion? Okay, so I move that it be included,
I'll second the motion.
and I have no further discussion about it.
Okay. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed? 2-1 opposed.
Should we call David?
Uh,
Get a vote. I'm
David
kidding.
did say, oh, yeah, but
Call him
just for the record, he did
call
say
on
he
his
was going to
vote.
be late today. But I am going to text him to make sure he knows that we're at the Euchre, because I did go to town hall first, so.
So it
Then
was 2 to
the
1 and 3 to 1?
So the next item on the list looks a little less, more straightforward,
3-1
Going
against,
down the
2-1
list.
against, okay.
are we? If we're going down this list,
Yes.
the next item, rifles, which I wonder what the public thinks about when they see this agenda, but that seems a little more straightforward than what we just talked about, right? Is that just literally, instead of putting 10 rifles in
yes, and that's
capital
just-
plan this year, it's 5 this year, 5 next year?
And that was just for the Board of Selectmen. The FinCom have already given their recommendation on this.
Which is what?
Yes.
Okay.
And to Chris's point, we're only revisiting it because you hadn't seen the updated reduced amount.
Oh, okay.
Welcome, David. Hello.
Thanks, David.
So we've already made our recommendations affirmatively 3-1, right? 3-0, I'm sorry.
On this sheet, am I missing something? Where is it on this sheet, please? So on live rifles.
At the Board of
on-
Selectmen meeting, I had asked the chief if he could cut it in half. He said yes, and he subsequently reaffirmed he could from 10 to 5, and that, so that's the answer we got. He can do it. So I thought our vote previously was 3-0 in favor of reducing the number of rifles that are going to be recalibrated, or what he's going to do with them, from 10 to 5.
Well, I'm not sure that we voted, but I think that's maybe the way we would vote. But I think we had the discussion. I kind of wish we had, because this sheet says that we did not vote.
Anthony, I think we
Yeah.
voted.
Again, it's because it's just different information. So I don't recall what the vote was, or if it was
The
deferred
chief
to get
said he
information.
probably could do it. He needed to check with the armaments master, whoever that is, and that, but he gave us an affirmative response to my request that we go from 10 to 5, subject to him coming back and saying he couldn't do it for some reason. He never came back and said he couldn't do it, so I thought
Okay.
that our vote.
It was yes? Okay.
Yes, but nevertheless, we can always vote again. All in favor of accepting the chief's recommendation, we go from 10 to 5.
Aye.
Unanimous, 3-0. We're still well-armed.
Debate that.
Interesting point.
For the revolution.
So I think that, all right, so that covers, we have Jackie sitting there with actually the Excel spreadsheet, so as those items came off, Jackie, my math, 394,600, that would be free cash available for the operating budget?
What?
Okay.
This one?
Yeah, I think you missed one.
Are we gonna
You missed the
The
ambulance.
water.
The chief withdrew the ambulance.
Oh, and then SCADA?
Oh, I'm sorry, the scatter.
The finance committee has to understand that.
Oh, sorry. Yes, the scatter system. So as I made,
Anthony, could you just back up in the ambulance? What happened with that?
The chief is looking at other options right now. There was some, he was looking at some used models that were available, so he's still exploring what other options out there that maybe he could fit using his gift account, which he used for the last time that they purchased the existing, well, the ambulance that's no longer functioning.
So this won't be a 21 capital request at all?
Correct.
Okay.
Let me amplify that. So I spent an hour and a half with the chief over this in the pumper truck, and that I asked for some statistics. How many times did we not have an availability of a second ambulance to go on a run that we had 2 people who were injured in a thing, we needed 2 ambulances, and/or 2 separate incidents where we needed an ambulance? The chief came up over an annual basis, there were 41 such incidents, and that the projected revenue of that was far short of what would justify a new, or not new, a refurbished second ambulance of $250,000, and that, or thereabouts. And so there's no way we could justify $250,000 for a second ambulance when we already had a backup ambulance service from Cataldo. If we had 2 or 3 or 4, we still, the town is well-served by our previous ambulance company who can still pitch in if we have multiple. So there's no way 41 incidents would even come close on an amortized basis over any period of time you want to do. So on the other hand, he thought he could get away with a much cheaper alternative on the order of $10,000. I was intrigued with $10,000, but he subsequently withdrew that because he didn't think he could pull it off. And so that's where that stands. And so that we can't afford a second ambulance for $250,000.
We asked for similar kind of data and backup to support
Yes.
that. We haven't seen anything, but he gave you a figure, obviously verbally.
No, not verbally. He had pressed him, and I went to Panera Bread, and you know, and that, lots of things good happened to Panera Bread. Anyway, I pressed him in advance for data, and he gave me the data.
Oh, so you have the
We
data.
talked about it, and it just didn't come close.
Yeah, okay.
Although we're still advocating for it. He understood that we couldn't spend that amount of money. And these ambulances, even refurbished, even used, cost a lot of money.
I think on the order of 100,000, right? Not $250,000
Well,
for the
at
ambulance,
time,
right?
maybe it came down, maybe he had some donuts afterwards, but at that time, it was $220 to $250, even for a refurbished one. So, but it wouldn't even just,
100.
No,
well,
It's off anyway. The ask has been removed from
it's a
FY21.
floating number, and that,
Certainly expensive.
he came down from 220 to 10,000 on one, you know, that for using the old, refurbishing the engine or whatever the heck they did with this. But in any event, it would have to be, even in 100,000, it doesn't cut it.
Right, well, certainly would be tough to do. So in our discussion too with the chief, the question was asked, I think Jim asked also about a used ambulance, or another FinCom.
well, and data to back up.
Yeah, like what other
Revenue we're gonna
options can we
produce.
explore? And also, I just think, just a general comment, so we're all on the same page, so I don't mean to belabor this, but promoting the ambulance service in general, I think, is really important for the town, because it's working well. I mean, setting aside the question or potential future ownership of a second ambulance, which I think it makes sense, generally speaking, new, used, expensive, cheap, whatever, the program's working really well.
It is.
And it's generating revenue for the general fund of the town.
It is.
So that's, I think, something that the public needs to be aware of, and I know it's a little odd to say, hey, you know, the more people we bring to the hospital, the more car accidents there are, the more revenue we're generating, but if you think of accidents are going to happen, people are going to be injured, they're there providing a critical public safety service, and the revenue's going to the town, that's all, so.
So in other words, the fundamental ambulance service that we, the town of Wenham, provide to the residents
Right.
and so forth, is in control. And there is a very adequate backup with Cataldo, which is what Jack said earlier.
Right.
So we're good there. The attempt to look at a second ambulance was to see how far along going forward would it make sense for us, revenue-wise, to be able to perform at a higher level and provide 2 ambulances for how many usage? And that's what I think Jack was trying to get
Yeah,
to.
the first ambulance is, response times are down from 8 to 6 minutes. We're generating in excess of $100,000 in additional revenue after expenses, so it's a huge success both in terms of services and financially. However, it doesn't extend to a second one.
So it may down the road somewhere, but we'll
Unless we double the size of
cross
the
that
runner.
bridge when the
Right.
chief
A
thinks
lot more
it's
people
adequate.
get in accidents or something, I don't know. And they're doing a great job, so, you know.
Yes,
that,
and it really provides our personnel another avenue of intellectual and training programs so that, you know, they're not just left with house fires, which have reduced significantly over the years because of building codes and so forth. You know, it's a positive, but then, you know, what happens with your personnel? And every one of these folks have been quite enthused by the programs.
Well, they're all EMTs. It makes it a lot
Yes.
easier for the fire department to recruit these volunteer call firefighters
Yep.
when they're EMTs and they can be used for these emergency calls.
Yep.
SCADA.
So just for the selectmen's purposes, this is a capital project that you originally saw at $50,000. The new quote that Eric got was $150,000. In speaking with Eric today, he couldn't be here to answer any questions, but Eric explained to me that he feels that that number is the ceiling, and he's working on lowering that through different options that could be available, but that is, he's saying, the absolute worst case, but he certainly will try to be under that dollar amount. He just didn't have an...
Was his, I forgot, was the water department paying for this? Or
So this was coming from the water
Yeah,
department's
coming from
reserves,
as part of their funds?
Yeah.
part of their retained earnings, yeah.
That's right. But they're all our funds.
So I would hope that every effort is made to understand why it went from initially 50 to 150. A tripling of the proposed cost says that either the new one's way off or the old one was way off. So what's the difference, I guess? And Eric, like you said, isn't here to speak to that, but just for those who are following along at home, this is basically the communication, as Jack said earlier, the communications link between the critical water systems infrastructure now runs on Verizon copper lines, and so at some period coming up in 21 or whatever, Verizon's no longer going to support those copper wires for means of communication. Should anything happen, we're kind of stuck, and this is a wireless mechanism, which I'm sure could have its own issues too. But that said, it's an upgrade to it, and providing water is obviously a critical service for Wenham. So when I look at it like opportunity cost, we could be risking a critical service potentially. I don't have a good sense for whether it should be 50,000 for these antennae and, you know, computers to drive them, or it should be 70 or 150.
Well, I met with Anthony this morning, late this morning. I only found out myself, it went from 50 to 150, and I was shocked. And that, so I want to understand the process of how we went from 50 to 150. Was it only one bid? What was the process? How many people do we ask for bids? How many vendors are out there to do this? What is the criticality of getting it right away? It's a lot of money, and other than what you just described in terms of obsolescent communication through Verizon, I'm not comfortable simply saying, oh, well, it went from 50 to 150. What the heck? No. You know, that's not the way I've been brought up, and that I want to know a lot more about why it went from, is 150 still a good number? And I just heard from Anthony, well, maybe a ceiling. That I would have thought that we had real firm bids in writing for $50,000. Maybe we did, maybe we didn't, but that needs more investigation on my part, and I'm not willing to support that right now, although I understand the reasons why we need it, but saying, oh, well, we tripled it overnight and we don't know why is not good enough for me.
I do know from when Eric came, because he discussed this with the FinCom, his main thing for the increase was these copper lines. They didn't factor in replacing these copper lines in that first estimate. That was only the 50,000. It it didn't take into effect the upgrade to the new wireless system. I don't know if that's the whole cost, but I know that was a portion of the increase.
I mean, this is 5 minutes before midnight, I mean, that we have to decide tonight, and, I'm just saying that I only learned 10 hours ago or something like that, whatever it is.
Well-
I'm not happy about that.
I agree that we need to get some answers, but fortunately, it's not, it doesn't necessarily have to impact the rest of our discussion tonight because it's water funds. Not that we would support it at town meeting or any time else, but for tonight's purposes, we can say, yeah, we got to have more information on that. But I don't think it stops us from talking about the other things that we have on the agenda tonight, only because it's from a fund that's elsewhere.
From the water fund?
Yeah.
Right.
Right. I don't disagree with Jack. Be nice to have more information, and Alex. Be
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, in retrospect, I believe we should have pushed more so earlier on that, picking up on the increase. I don't think we did enough of that investigation, and just it strikes me that it's a huge increase. I also know that this is not like a redundancy effort, but it's basically it's a proactive measure to reduce risk of service down for water. And to no end you could spend to protect yourself against all risks of infrastructure. But I recall Eric saying when he met with us and presented on his budget, and I even repeated it back, that he said the current system is working. So again, it is a proactive means of bolstering the communications, making this work. By all means, the expenditure is critical and necessary if it is, but it's hard to know exactly.
Yeah, and
what
without
point it needs
the
to be done.
adequate information, you're right. I mean, we're not the only town that needs water. I mean, it's across the country.
We might be the only ones on copper. I don't know that.
That's a good point, very good point. Are we one of the last reptiles still using copper lines, or,
Reptiles?
Dinosaurs.
dinosaurs?
Is there anything, does anyone know, in like the Safe Drinking Water Act or Massachusetts implementing legislation or regulations about what your communication systems need to be able to do, and any kind of backup to make sure that you have safe water?
Oh, you mean redundancy within the system?
Yeah, and this doesn't even sound like it's redundancy. I think it's just
Not since I got here.
a communication system, but I'm assuming there's, if our system breaks down, it's broken, and how do we get it fixed? And it would be a lag time if we don't have the SCADA system. So
Yeah.
my question is, does that violate any kind of Massachusetts drinking water or other water regulations? I'm assuming it doesn't, just since it's even an option to not fund it, but I just want to double check.
We'd have to ask Eric to come and make a presentation to the board. You're invited to ask those types of questions and other questions like that. Right now, it's just finance, either funded or not right now. That's the subject right now.
I say we move on.
So it's just, so we put this on the agenda for next week for Eric to come, make a presentation, outline.
Good.
Is Eric away? Do you know if Eric's, when he gets back?
I didn't know he was away.
He comes back Tuesday? Oh, okay. So we could have him come Tuesday, if you want.
That'd be great.
Okay. All right, so now,
If he comes Tuesday, he has to be prepared to answer the questions I've just asked right now. And that,
Yes.
And I did ask early today for a written memorandum prior tonight. Was he able to produce that?
he had already left. He was away.
already left, okay.
So the only thing we had was the quote that we forwarded off.
I was hoping for a more detailed explanation of why I went from 50 to 150, so we could share that with you tonight, but apparently that was not be able to pull off.
Yeah. He was on the road.
On the road, okay.
All right, so after these, final free cash number that would be available for the operating budget, changes from your roll-up sheet. If you look on the front page, sorry, I don't have my glasses.
Where am I?
They reading?
2.5?
Oh, it's too powerful, but I'll try it.
They reduced the numbers, by the way. There's a special magnification.
Oh, jeez, he's a good Jack.
Whatever it says, it takes 10% off.
All right, so 424,705, it's about halfway down on your page, right over here.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so that number now will go to 539,705.
Repeat that, please?
Sure, 424,705.
Yep,
Becomes 539,705.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
115,000 ambulance and comp study, is that right?
Yes.
Ambulance is already out.
Ambulance is already out.
115 is just the comp and the master plan.
Master plan.
Yeah, those did. That's a bad sign.
Special 10% on glasses.
So that makes the total revenue and free cash number, which maybe Jackie has.
Yeah, Jackie, do you have a new
You're
number on
doing
that?
You're doing the.
She's got the spreadsheet.
Numbers in.
The total revenue and free cash for fiscal '21 will come up to $20,580,539. Got it?
One more time,
28 cents.
Jackie?
$20,580,539. That's total revenue and free cash for fiscal '21.
And we'll send you a clean copy tomorrow, so you'll have a,
Okay, good.
if you don't want to, it's just for,
Just to kind of get that.
yeah.
539.
Goes down 115.
All right,
Well, so, just so that, can you go back to that slide?
that was,
So now we're saying that before we were using 435, now we're using 164 in terms of use,
right.
right?
No, 435, and then we added in the 115.
Oh, right. But right, as of all of our decisions tonight, the use of free cash is 164, I think,
For pay-as-you-go.
Yeah. for, yeah.
Wait, I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
So the free cash that we're now proposing to use to
Right.
supplement this budget is $164,000.
To buy the capital items on the pay-as-you-go.
For capital.
No, so two separate things. So 164,000 using free cash to pay for one-time capital.
Correct.
To balance the budget,
Using 539,705.
539,705.
Yes.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Now, sorry,
Go ahead.
539,705, correct me if I'm wrong, plus our 250 mandated in reserves would yield the total certified free cash for FY '19, is that right? Is that, so we start with total certified free cash?
Yes.
We have 250 policy in reserves?
Yes.
And does that leave us with, I'm sorry, and then the minus 539,705 for the budget, that leaves us with the remainder for the expenditures, is that correct?
250,000.
Is it all accounted for?
So per the selectmen's policy, 250,000. We'll
Right.
keep in free cash to start replenishing for next year.
And the 539,705 uses the balance of it.
The answer is yes.
Yes, thank you. Just wanted, the big
Thank you.
chunks of it, I just wanted to make sure we have, okay.
Got it. Thank you.
So the remaining policy discussion decisions for the operating budget is, the first one, loose leaf was,
Can I interrupt you for one
Sure.
second, Anthony? Just because there was a lot of focus on page 1, given those updates, which thank you for keeping track. What that does to the final number at the end, for those playing along at home, changes our fiscal deficit, our budget imbalance, and potential override need from $1,210,504 to $1,095,504 with the added free cash / reduction in capital.
Right.
Or 1.1 million, I'm going to call it.
right,
Okay, thank you. Just for context for this
Sure.
stuff here,
with the assumed 3% growth on the school.
assuming 3% on school, not actual,
Right.
right?
No, in here, the school's fully
Oh,
funded.
I'm
That's
sorry,
fine,
that's
yeah,
right. We
yeah,
fully
yeah.
loaded the schools. I'm sorry, that's right. My mistake.
say that'd be
Voted
disastrous.
with their budgeted, with their voted.
With their voted budget last night,
Their
yeah.
updated budget.
Right, yeah. So it's $1 million together.
Right, so capital as discussed, budgets as currently formulated, schools in actuality, 1.1 million override.
Yes.
Where it all stands.
The finance director agrees with that, right?
I'm opening up for anyone to
Yes.
make sure I'm wrong, or that I'm If I am wrong, then I'm told.
What is that number that you had, 1.1?
The exact number, Jim?
Yep.
From our finance director over his shoulder, $1,095,504.
That includes the new 8.57 operations of the school committee as well.
9.57.
No, it's
Well,
up
it's
to 9 now.
9.57 to us, right?
Well, it's 8.5 plus the
Total.
capital, right?
Right.
Yeah.
8.57 total, yeah.
Total.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd like to settle on a number that is just the gross operating budget year-over-year increase, because there are so many modifications of
Yeah.
it for discussion purposes that it personally drives me nuts.
True.
So,
Second that.
okay, thank you. We can solve that later.
Yes.
If we could solve it, we'd be
We'll be doing it
geniuses
now.
anyway. Loose leaf.
So loose leaf. So loose leaf was actually eliminated in the funding for that in last year's budget because of the MS4 permit. So as you know, we still did loose leaf collection, which left right now Bill trying to see what he can get in there for the permitting. I'm not quite sure if he can get everything that was required done. But going forward, he's indicated that next year, in order to continue loose leaf, I think he's thrown out a number of $45,000. Chris, is that right? It's like another number that's sticking in my head right now. So $45,000 to continue. So the MS4 permit can get satisfied, and loose leaf could get satisfied. So now with that 1.095, we'd actually be adding in $45,000.
Can I just ask a couple clarifying questions, because this one is complicated, obviously? Chris, I'm going to look to you. So that 45,000, plus or minus, but roughly, right? That would go towards Weston and Sampson, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the amount. So I'm going to take a cut at this, and you tell me.
Well, not really Weston and it would more so is, because a lot of that money, the 45,000 is salaries. He's got to pay overtime to do that. So instead of the workers doing the loose leaf pickup, we can do this MS4 permitting in-house instead of having a contract
Instead of
with Weston and
contracted out to
Sampson.
Weston.
Right,
Yes,
instead
because
of
if he does the
contracting.
loose leaf, then he's not going to be able to do the MS4 permit, and we're going to have to pay Weston and Sampson to come in and do the Weston.
That's what I was
permit.
attempting to,
Yes.
right, to spell out. Right, so this is a complete indirect shift of actual expenditures. It would be much simpler, which it isn't the case, if it was just like, oh, for loose leaf, Bill's got to hire another couple of guys to help out, it's 45,000, done. And then you could weigh the associated cost more easily. But as Anthony said, this relates to the DEP MS4 stormwater permitting requirements that Bill had indicated to us when he spoke to us recently that they deferred for 2 years. So they deferred last year, and they deferred this current year. That's right. And you can't, and by what is being deferred? It's the testing and the, this catch basin and this outfall and all that fun stuff. And if you defer next year, then we're up against fines.
We're up against fines, correct.
So
That's right. I forgot about the
Yeah,
deferral. That's a very important point.
it's easy to lose track of all these little
Now you
pieces
have
that
to-
add up to it.
Now it's time to pay the piper. Or you're going to
Right.
get
Either
charged.
The
half
piper,
Bill's
so you
team.
don't have to pay the piper.
Right, yeah, test the nest. So either Bill's team does it, and they won't have time for loose leaf. I mean, he's told us this, obviously, he's
Yeah.
long since advocated getting out of the business of loose leaf pickup.
Yeah.
We didn't get in front of it last year to tell the towns, tell residents, hey, we're not going to do leaves, obviously. So he picked them up, and now this year, we're basically funding in the same way they did last year, with the expectation that they'll pick up the work of the stormwater permitting. So I don't know how this one gets
So,
sold or
Presented.
presented.
You would do that at the annual town meeting.
If no one in this room understood what I just said, Jack, or
so
kidding.
if we ask ourselves, or the community asks us by that, I mean, this is almost like a tradition in town, the loose leaf pickup.
Sure.
And if we don't do the loose leaf pickup, what is the net gain for the community? In dollars?
We just
There
don't-
is
$45,000. right?
It's no
So it's even.
savings now, it's even, right now it's as
I'm
is.
asking the question,
There's no
knowing
savings.
that there's trade-offs.
Right,
But
right.
so so I think we'd have to enunciate clearly what is the gain for the community by not doing a loose leaf and taking,
We'd have to add another
Right, so-
$45,000 to the budget.
And we took it out last year to boot,
yeah,
which complicates things
even a little bit
ever so
more.
slightly, yeah.
The story is, we have an unfunded mandate from the Federal Clean Water Protection Act, and it's crowding out funds from DPW. So we need to take funds used for loose leaf and use it
There
to
you
do
go.
the stormwater testing.
There you go. Good
Yeah.
enough.
And that's the story, and then the numbers that support that story is a little bit more of a shell game.
Agreed, in the context
Right.
of our town and its operation. So I agree with everything you said, where there's an unfunded mandate, but it's not imposed upon Bill's team. It's just got to get done, and he's stepping
Right,
up
we're-
saying,
we're
hey, we could do
imposing
it.
it on his-
Instead of giving, right.
Right.
He's self-imposing. He's offering up his crew's able services and personnel to say, we can save the town money by doing it. We can't do loose leaf at the same time. That's where the shell game, to your
Yes,
point,
yes.
comes into play. And I think that, I don't know, maybe it's just left up to the residents. Do you want to pay for it and get it, or not?
Well, but there's also a service that will be provided, in that residents would have to bag their leaves, and
Thank you, Jim.
Casella would then come and pick up those bags at a reduced cost of 15,000, 12,000.
12,000, something like that. You're right,
So there's still a service involved while we
Yeah,
also meet this
11,800.
other mandate.
that's right. So it's a change or reduction in service that has been budgeted for as it was last year, although maybe we didn't budget for the 12,000 last year, I forgot.
No, I don't think so.
No, we
Does this include 12,000 for Casella?
kicked the
To pick up
football.
the bags? Yeah, we did. Do you happen to know?
Not
Or
sure.
would it be plus 12 if we did?
I'll have to check
Okay.
the trash
Okay.
thing to see if we built it in there. I'm not positive.
Okay.
I'll have to check.
So I can imagine the community at some point in some way saying, so if we spent another if we agreed to spend another $45,000, we could have loose leaf pickup? And the answer would be yes, right?
Yes.
If we added $45,000 to this budget, I'm not advocating, I'm just saying this is,
That would be the question.
then we could have loose leaf pickup.
Yeah, as the indirect associate,
Well, but that's.
indirect
We're
associated cost.
recommending reduction of cost by the 45,000 by eliminating the loose
It might
leaf
not be a
pickup.
one-to-one
Well,
with that, because if Bill starts doing the loose leaf pickup, then we're gonna need a contract out with someone to do the MS4 permitting. We're not, so it may not be one-to-one. So it may cost more money now to do the MS4 permitting for Weston and Sampson or another company to come in and do that than
Yeah, I
us
recall like an
in-house.
extra
Yeah.
30,000 or something for that estimate.
Yeah,
You
you're
gave
right,
us the
it's
numbers
pretty
last year.
complicated.
It is. We might need one page split in half with option A, what we've currently budgeted, assuming Bill's team isn't going around for 6 weeks doing leaves. I mean, that just because that's the financial plan. That doesn't need to be the actual service implementation plan that we follow through on.
Right.
That's option A, kind of current state, which is a change in service, or option B, which I would just kind of tee up as no change in service, meaning they drive around and suck up the leaves, and the incremental cost associated. No 12,000 for Casella pickup, but more to Weston and Sampson, maintenance and whatever, like, I think we need that.
I think so, too.
I apologize that I haven't
Yeah,
put
like
that
a
together,
crosswalk,
but,
yep.
is that something you might be able to help with?
And I feel like last year, year before, several years, Bill has spoken about the piece of equipment that is used to actually suck up the leaves. And it had some cost implications. It was either getting old or needing maintenance or breaking down a lot. So there may be some, if loose leaf pickup were to be reinstated, that might be an additional cost.
Catherine, I recall exactly what you're saying, that there's a high demand on repair work for that piece of equipment because it sucks up a lot of other things besides leaves.
So it would be, again, to Alex's analysis point, that would just be another point added to the side of
And his memo, Bill's memo has pointed out what that repair cost is on the leaf trailer, how it
Was that
breaks
in
down.
his original presentation? I've got to look for that.
I think so. He's
If I
presented the
can't
same
find it,
information,
I'll ask for it again.
Last year it was.
honestly, for a couple of years.
Yeah, I tried to look for
Yeah.
last year's
And-
because I remember it from then. Okay.
Right.
I
Hasn't
just-
been lost on us, but I mean, maybe it's an opportunity, I don't know what the right forum is, if it's town meeting or whenever it is, to just try and find out what do residents want? Do they want to just pay for this, or are they willing to have it go away?
Well, I also,
I'm not in a position to really speak on behalf of
and
residents.
just listening to how we talk about it, I do think it would be helpful if we just, because it makes it sound like we're ending loose leaf pickup, but we're just modifying our leaf pickup. It's not totally gone, it's a modified service.
But
Oh,
for many, there's, that distinction is lost. For me, the service would be gone. And I
Yeah.
think others might be in the same boat. And this isn't about me. I mean, I've already gone on the record by saying I love the service, but
But to Carrie's point.
I'm not bagging 'em.
There'll
That's
still
what
be a
it was after.
bag service.
there is one. It's just conditional. Yeah, it's like, it's a modified service. You're absolutely right. But I'm saying to gauge the temperature, for this longstanding tradition of having picked them up, I would just be careful not say like, there's no difference. That's
Well, I'm not
all.
saying there's no difference, but we're not ending leaf pickup, we're modifying leaf pickup.
Agreed.
Just in
Yes.
terms of how it's presented. The other thing is, that we've talked about is no other community does anything like does a loose leaf pickup.
Well, you know, that
I
never
like
really
it too,
matters
I'm
to
just
Wenham
saying.
residents.
Yeah, I know.
And I'm with you, Alex. I know, if you ask me how many years ago was that, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, when we went before town meeting and said, okay, we had $35,000 at that time, we'll do a loose leaf pickup, and gave them a choice, and it was sort of, looked almost unanimous that they wanted a loose leaf pickup. Now the stakes are a little higher, there are different people that'll be sitting in the room. People seem passionately, if they want it, they're passionate about it, but I don't,
They can make the choice.
Yep.
yeah, I,
For clarification too, right, so we are, the change of service is no longer loose leaf, it's curbside bag pickup. But to Chris, your point, I think, is that it's not going to be a $45,000 charge back to the town. It's going to be more than that.
right.
So if we go out with the number, your left and right, it will be, I'll make up a number, $90,000 to get loose leaf pickup and still comply and still keep it
Right.
in-house.
That's,
Because we want the testing in-house, because in the long run, it saves us money. I think that's the figure we go before the town.
yeah.
And make that, if that's what we want to
And
decide.
I do want to say also that the 12,000 is not in the trash budget right now, so that would increase.
That adds
To
to those
57,000.
costs.
That would add.
Keep your
if,
finger out on that wall socket.
that back.
So now we're at
So
57.
zero services in there. Pickup would be the
I guess.
12,000 hauling fee.
Yep.
Thank
So
you.
the saving, I guess, how does that translate to a town person? So
Yeah,
does
it's
this
not a
budget
straight.
increase by $12,000?
Well, unless we contemplate elimination entirely of the service, at a minimum, we probably have another 12,000 that finds its way into his budget.
Right.
And then from there, it's the incremental difference we were talking about, whatever that may be. And if we can sharpen pencils on that, at least we have the story that people can decide on.
Right.
Maybe it's just us, maybe
I just wanna be
collectively, or maybe it's
Would we
residents.
make that a warrant article?
Sorry?
Would we make that a warrant article?
I don't know. I mean,
I don't want to
you
get
raise a
warrant
point.
article fatigue, but how else do we
I think
get?
it's a, s-
It might be a smart move.
To Catherine's
I
point,
think
if it
it's a
was,
good suggestion.
yeah, if it was raised a while ago at town meeting, I mean,
It's a question, not more like we should. I don't know. How do you gauge the interest of the town? Just at the town meeting, raise your hand? Or,
Well,
Yeah, there'd be a vote. I mean, it depends on how the wording of the article was, but clearly, if you had a separate article, people would have the choice and laid out with the numbers as clearly as possible in the article.
this
People
was,
could make that
we
decision.
had part of this discussion, or this discussion partly last year, where I think there was a contemplation of putting the money in the budget to do, we did half of it, to do the loose leaf pickup. However, to explain to the,
yeah, I remember vaguely.
right,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
explain to the town meeting, this budget includes loose leaf pickup. We could save, or we're recommending, I'm not saying we should do it this way, we could save $90,000 if we didn't, and that would be the white paper. I think last year we decided that was a little complicated, and at the very end, we did not bring that up.
I think we'd have to do it in the beginning in Article 2. Once we pass Article 2, having the warrant articles afterwards, going back to that one is going to be very problematic. So I think going through the article, whatever it is, Article 1, Article 2, we say, okay, by the way, everyone, whoever makes the speech, if you want a loose leaf pickup, we'd have to add $45,000, and here's how the numbers would change, if that's the case. I don't think we can get by Article 2 and then go back to,
Okay.
but in effect, I think that we need to let the people know they have a choice, and here's the choice, and here's the money associated with that choice. Do you want to change it right now or not?
So we need the final figure of what that number is then?
Yeah.
Okay,
Pardon me?
thank you.
Final figure for the net added cost we would need.
Yeah.
So it's not 45,000, we have to give them the actual net number of,
Well, we fudged it this year, we can fudge it next year for 45,000 or whatever, or 46.5 or something, whatever it's going to be. And that, but I think we have to do it in the presentation of, is this Article 1 or Article 2 this year?
Article 1 is the levy limit budget. So would that be Article 2, Jacob?
Article 1 is the levy limit budget, Article 2 is the
Free cash.
free cash
Yeah,
to
Article three.
subsidize the operating budget, so it would be Article 3 unless that's an override.
Okay, Article 3.
okay, thank you.
You agree, Alex?
Yeah, but just some questions too, and we don't have to get into these details now, I guess. Would it be a standalone that we're envisioning?
No, we just tell the people, we
Just-
go through it's, look at, by the way, this budget only contains, we've eliminated loose leaf pickup, it's bag pickup, here's what that entails, and if you want to go back to loose leaf pickup, we don't have the money in the budget to do it. If you want to, if the town wants to vote, and we can stop it and ask people to vote, or somebody can make a motion, no, I want to have,
It's like a hold through the budget
a hold,
process.
Yeah.
exactly, and a hold, and that we want to have bag, loose leaf pickup, and that would add 40, whatever.
So, right, so either a reduction or addition to the final line item
Addition.
on the floor.
It would be an addition.
An addition, okay.
And so we just
But-
change the amount of money on that line item
Got
for
it,
whatever.
got it. So we wouldn't be stripping anything out, which gets complicated
Right.
on town floor,
Right,
town
right.
meeting floor.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's the easiest way to do it.
Right.
Going back after we've got Article 3 passed, trying to
Right.
modify that is going to be messy.
Right.
I agree in not having a separate article
Okay, same,
completely.
yeah.
But if we do an addition, then don't we need to find something to reduce to keep it a balanced budget? Which is why we had proposed it last year.
Increase the override number.
Just increase the override. We're
Increase the overall.
way beyond all that
I
stuff
don't think we
now.
can increase the override number on the floor, because the ballot will already have been
Yeah.
printed with a number on it,
It's
right?
like municipal
This-
finance law, you have to have a
This is what we're
balanced
up against
budget.
last year.
Right,
Yeah.
and this is what we kind of spun around
Right, so
to.
that's why it came back to what you just said, is you have it over, and you can offer a strike to the budget, which reduces the number, which is okay. You still are within a balanced budget. But if you offer an add, you're not in a balanced budget anymore, which violates municipal finance law or something.
I'm really leery of changing the material character of all of the articles at town meeting floor. We're up against that last year, where Articles 1, 3, and 4 all materially changed from what they were printed in the warrant book. Some, all for various reasons. Not one of them was what it was as printed.
We're meeting with our lawyer in the next couple of days, and we can ask her advice on that, but I think one way or the other, we have to make sure that people know in advance when they come to the town meeting
Yeah.
that it's not loose leaf pickup anymore, and there's a cost associated with that, and that's 46, whatever the exact number is, and we don't have that in the budget. So how we deal with that exactly, we could use some perhaps advice on that.
Also, potentially, and not to spend all night on this, is the last thing I'm going to say on it, a non-binding thing wherein we fund bagged this year and give them the opportunity to weigh in for FY '22. Just throwing it out there.
Or if the decision is made, if someone raises their hand and people vote that they definitely want it, could we not take it from free cash and therefore not impact the,
That's a good,
just
The use of
increase
free
the amount
cash.
of free cash that we would be using?
Well, that would change Article 2
Yeah,
for the
it
use of
would.
free cash, which will
Okay.
spell out to the dollar. Yeah.
Yeah, it's.
And we've already used our free cash to only leave us that our 250,000 left, so then we drop under that 250,000.
Let us work on that to find out
Okay.
the best way to communicate to the town what
Give
we're
them
doing.
the option.
And if there's a revolution and how we deal with that. And
Yeah, exactly.
And we need some advice, I think, how to
Great.
exactly deal with that with our esteemed general counsel.
Okay.
But communicating the fact that there's a change and we're not sneakers by, and that it's, for those in elective office, it's important.
So just to recap, the budget that we're presenting, the levy limit budget, is going to be a budget that does not envision or fund loose leaf pickup, but will, when we change it, $12,000 worth, but will fund bag leaf pickup. And that's what we communicate to folks.
Yes.
And they go from there, we'd have the information. Okay,
Right.
got it.
Everyone got that? Cool.
Okay.
Yep, thanks. Speaking of services that might change and informing the public,
Pleasant Pond.
I don't even know if I want to start, be the one to start on this. Where are we with, what's the, so I'm, what's the final recommendation from the police chief?
So the chief certainly supports still having lifeguards.
Why don't you back up? Maybe the FinCom doesn't know what's going
Well,
on.
they know more than.
we get it, but
And we've got
starting with Town of Hamilton, for those watching at home, especially where
Decided to.
Include that in the conversation.
Yeah. So,
Go ahead.
you want to do it?
Well, let's just go really big picture, because that's the only part of it that I really have in front of me. So the issue, the reason we're even talking about this, is it because it costs us, the towns, Hamilton and Wenham together, roughly $25,000 to run the program at the Pleasant Pond Beach as it has been running, with lifeguards and gatekeepers, et cetera. We only sell, I don't actually know.
It's about $3,300, so roughly around there.
Right,
And
so-
we charge $25 for the season for a parking sticker.
We sell stickers, and we make about $3,000. So obviously, a really big gap between what we're making, what we're taking in, and what we're spending. So I think we've been bouncing around ideas of how should we eliminate this? What should we do with it? The last I heard, the police weighed in on it, and that's why I was asking for.
Well, prior to that, the town of Hamilton weighed on it.
Oh,
Right,
that's
and
true,
And the
yes.
town of Hamilton has indicated that they really don't want to continue to subsidize their portion. So they haven't got back to us yet definitively, because I said we were still working on some options to maybe either reduce that gap or eliminate that gap. But obviously still have Pleasant Pond. So the way that could be done would be no lifeguards. Swim at your own risk. Still have the gatekeeper that would have to,
There's two gatekeepers.
does he normally have two? I thought he had one.
No, I
Yeah, he
thought
wanted
the
two.
police
He
was
wanted two.
suggesting.
Well,
Oh, he wanted two.
well, you've talked to the chief about that too, recently, right?
Yeah, and
Whatever, I guess it's immaterial at this point.
He did mention that in our discussion.
He wanted
Yeah.
two lifeguards.
Two
I thought it was
gatekeepers. Two people.
Two people down.
he always wanted two people down
there.
there.
For
He
safety
didn't, because usually the gatekeeper was a kid.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to leave a kid down there because there's fishermen, he said, and some out-of-towners that come and use the pond too. So he wasn't really comfortable, even though there was a phone present, he wasn't really comfortable, so that's why he preferred having the lifeguard and the gatekeeper. We did talk, and I talked to Regina, and I forget her last name. Baker, yes. And which is the president of the Pleasant Pond Association.
Yep.
And she was concerned because she thought that you were going to completely close Pleasant Pond. So I explained, no, that's not the case, and what really is discussion purposes whether or not we need to reduce costs, and whether that cost is lifeguards. And she indicated that her son was actually a gatekeeper, and they didn't have lifeguards back then. So, I recommended that the three of us sit down, her, the chief, and myself, and, she had some good ideas with maybe we can reduce the hours, or maybe, and I think the chief said we can start later. 10 o'clock, there's really not anybody down there, but maybe a mom and a young child. She says the crowds get there at different times, so Maybe we can look at reduction of some hours that wouldn't, excuse me, wouldn't hurt the overall use, the availability of the pond, excuse me. Been dying with a cold. So that's where we're at right now.
A quick question. Hamilton was contributing 12,000? Is that
10, almost 11,000, I think.
Yeah.
11,000?
They're about 43%, and we're 57%.
Okay, have they made the final decision to back out, or is that going before their town meeting? How's that going to work?
I asked Joe, could you let us have the opportunity to see and discuss this, and maybe there's increasing the the parking permit fee from 25 to say 50, and therefore it generates another 3,300. Reduction of some hours, maybe we're making that amount that we're needing to offset from the general fund smaller. So Joe was amenable to giving us some time.
So when will we have a response from?
He's waiting to hear back what we're would do to try to reduce that amount that they contribute.
So the plan then is for you to have the conversation with the chief and Regina and come up with a proposed expense or model.
You know, I think that increasing the parking sticker would be necessary.
Yes.
And maybe reduction of some hours of the lifeguard, and maybe not having a lifeguard all the time, maybe partial time. You know, certainly I think you have to schedule them every day, and you don't have good weather, so maybe there's some kind of decisions that the chief can make to not staff it with a lifeguard when it's a cold summer day.
I didn't look at this. We've had a sheet that talks about this for a while, and I haven't looked at it lately. But I need to ask the question, I guess. I think of the chief. We actually have, in order to staff with one lifeguard and one gatekeeper, it sounds like we have on staff at that time 5 lifeguards and 8 gatekeepers who must rotate through the hours. So if people, I guess I was thinking, okay, you know, maybe there are 2 gatekeepers and 2 lifeguards, but apparently that's a fair amount of staff.
Yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of them are younger kids that are probably only working maybe a shift a week. Maybe they're probably only, you know, look, because I was putting these numbers together, and a lot of them are only probably working, you know, 2 to 6 hours a week. And then the lifeguards were more so putting in a lot more hours, but the gatekeepers were, you know, real a day, 2 hours here, 2 hours there.
Younger kids.
Yeah.
So that's why there was more of them.
It's a good opportunity for the kids to find some kind of employment, but, okay. And I guess we need to also make the decision eventually, if Hamilton hears what we are proposing and chooses not to, we have that, I think, uncomfortable conversation of, do we charge Hamilton the same fee for our sticker that we do Wenham?
That's a fair question.
No, I'm not saying we have it now, because we don't have all the answers.
Can I just make a point? Right now, Pleasant Pond is in here, so this is part of the,
Oh, it is?
yeah. It's
It's in here
it's
and
fully loaded in
it's
here right now.
fully-
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So that could be,
So why
it'll be an offset in the other way.
So we should wait, it sounds like. It sounds like we should wait to hear what we hear back before we make a decision? Okay.
You know, I think at this point, it's just my opinion, I think that we work on increasing the fees, reduction of hours, taking a really close look at it, subsidizing it a little bit this year, kind of come back with a little better plan next year. That's just a
Yeah,
thought.
I support that approach because it minimizes the impact to the existing service, the benefit, that a lot of people enjoy and that we've heard from recently, so.
And we didn't know about, I didn't know that Regina was the president, and now getting them involved is really getting the citizens that use Pleasant Pond involved to help us shape those decisions and policy, and they have some great ideas, and she told me about the fundraising that they've done, so they've done a tremendous amount of work over there, and it's probably worth to work with her this year and relook at it next year.
I could not agree more.
Yeah, the work that they did was, it did two things. It improved the property area, it improved safety, because I think that area back in the 80s had deteriorated to...
It did, yeah, that's what she was telling me. It was almost
It became
unhabitable.
a hangout.
It was a hangout, it was
Kids
unsafe.
driving in and out of there.
They have. David, her husband, David Baker, and Regina have led that group down in the Pleasant Pond area in a very positive way.
Done a lot of work.
They've done some fundraising, I just mentioned. And I actually think there was some CPC money at some point.
There was. They're both from Hamilton and Wenham. Yeah, and they actually had a master plan, a little master plan for the beach that they've been working off of, and what she's going to share with us. Yeah, they've done a tremendous amount of work there.
I think in your conversations with Regina, one of the things I've thought about is if more people knew about the pond and there was a little more PR around it, there might be more people who would buy stickers.
There could be other opportunities for different type of revenue generation down there.
We've spoken to Rec, I think, about having some classes down there. I don't know if they do, kayaking classes or something that maybe we'd share revenue with the Rec department, so.
With a caveat that Hamilton still needs to produce a proportionate share of the cost for their, that's a huge percentage of Hamiltonians who use the pond. So if they are adamant they're not going to share any of the costs, I think we have to revisit what you just heard a minute ago. This is not fair for the Wenhamites to totally subsidize it.
Agreed.
Just a thought, if Hamilton did want to back out, and if we're increasing the Wenham residence fee from 25 to 50 for a parking sticker, maybe the Hamilton fee, if you still allow Hamilton to partake, then that would go from 25 to 100?
Something.
Something, yeah.
Yeah, that's what the,
Some way or another, we shouldn't, the Wenhamites shouldn't totally subsidize the cost of Pleasant Pond. If it's to increase sticker fees for Hamilton, fine, whatever.
The one thing, Anthony, I think we want to make sure, let's make sure the parking is not more than Cranes Beach.
Or what?
Yeah.
The parking's not more expensive than Cranes Beach.
and that the stickers don't cost more than the pool.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
But I think we've got some leeway there.
Yeah, I think so, too.
There's some elasticity of just,
I like that,
at some point,
elasticity.
at some point.
That's good. Okay.
Okay, so indirect water costs, this is kind of the informational purpose for you guys, that the Board of Water Commissioners did support the additional indirect cost that we were looking for, so that was $94,000. So built into this is actually the reduction. Jackie, what page is that on, the reduction?
Page 5, up to page 5.
Thank you.
That's a transfer into the general fund?
Yes, yes. Yeah, so that did help to keep that deficit at the, or it would have been, we've been looking at another $94,000, so.
Yep.
So I did hear Eric say that, and I also heard him say that he and the Water Commission was discussing what the fees would have, water rates would have to, how they would have to increase, how much they would have to increase in order to compensate for this. But they hadn't decided yet.
No.
So I guess I'm going to make a respectful request that they make that decision before town meeting so that we can tell people what their water rates are going to go up.
Yep.
Rather than look at, someone asks from the floor and we're looking at each other like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I
Alex,
thought
did he say he was going to forward you those at the,
Yeah, they were gonna look at a few different scenarios
and he thought he was going to
to the
share them
Water
with?
Commission, which they hadn't done yet at our meeting last week, and
Yeah.
then I think the intention was to try to get back to us well in advance of annual town meeting, because this is a big number that's gonna affect rates.
Right. we talked about like a $15 meter fee addition or something, and I don't know if that was quarterly. He threw out a couple numbers. They had some tiered.
He had about 7 options
structures,
of all of different, whether it was, there was always going to be a base rate increase, and then he was going to increase different amounts on tiers as well
Right.
to get to an amount.
But did they make a decision?
Not yet. Not yet. Sounds like no.
the night that you
Gary,
guys
do you have?
met.
I was at the meeting, and we made the decision to look at 94,000. If I remember correctly, the commissioners took the spreadsheets that gave the 7 different options, and were waiting for the next meeting, wanted to review them before making a decision on how to allocate it.
Yeah, because they didn't know when, the exact number, so they wanted to approve an exact number of the indirect cost before they really started looking into different scenarios. So now that they know the exact number, they can, hopefully at their next meeting.
So could you follow up with Eric and get that, what the options are, just so that both boards can see what the...
And those 7 different scenarios were all predicated on utilization of water. Is that correct? The amount of water used?
Really, only 2 of the scenarios met the full 94,000. And at the meeting, they committed to the 94,000 number.
Yeah.
And then Eric, I believe, said, well, here's 2 that saw that, I'll give you some more on the spreadsheet as far as the tiers and stuff. So that was left open until the next meeting as to how to actually allocate the different rates.
Oh, okay.
Which I presume, they meet once a month, so, I think. So I presume they'd have a meeting in March. Hopefully, that's
Before
when they
town meeting.
would decide, so that we'd have that answer before
Yeah,
town meeting.
because they would have met, they met before our meeting, so that was last
At
week,
night.
February 5th, I believe,
Right.
or 3rd, whatever that last Wednesday
It
was.
seems like a million years ago. Okay.
I'm just making a note, hold on. Okay.
Moving on, Water Department, additional staff?
So, yeah, one thing that is in the budget is that the Water Department asked for an additional person, and it was discussed a little bit on Saturday, but I didn't want to glance over an issue when you're facing the budget deficit and an override, and there's asking for staff. Even though that position is being funded from the water fund, it's an optics that I just wanted to make sure that it had an opportunity to be discussed, and so.
What was the rationale for additional staff? What's the criteria for it?
It was
He said it was a mandate that there should be 1 director and 2 staff.
Somebody else has to have a license. Right now, they rely upon a license by, that one of the other DPW workers has, but this would allow them to have another staff and not rely upon a DPW staff that has the license.
So there are 2 people who work in the water department now,
Yes.
and one of them is licensed? The people who work in the water department?
No, I think they're both, believe
So
one
they
is
need-
licensed.
I think there's
They're-
different levels of
So,
licenses.
Okay, so they need a third licensed person. Not a third person in the department, but a third license. I never have understood that. I've asked it a couple times with Eric, but I'm not sure.
Mention it was also monitoring the system. There's only 2 of them to monitor
Yeah,
water, and they needed a third just in case something happened.
Right, because they do it on the weekends and,
Yeah.
and sometimes there's vacations and so forth. And I don't know if this new electronic system maybe allows them to monitor remotely.
From the beach? Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, he did say there was an app for it.
There's an app for it. There's an app for everything.
Yeah, I was just reading his, his note here, and it's supposed, per, let's see, 310 CMR 22.118, et cetera, that the department has to be monitored 24/365, which then gets into the need for the additional staff member. Is the baseline on this. Oh, yeah,
Yep.
I was trying to read it off of here.
Has their staffing model, do we know?
There's a write-up on it.
Yes, I recall that. Does that make mention of if they had a third operator at any point? Was there a reduction at one point that they got down to 2 and want to get back to 3? I'm just, I know Eric said it was a coverage.
No, it says there, oh, that's distribution. It says there's no requirement that a distribution system have more than one shift. So I think they have 2 people that are covering the one shift. No?
Sounds like another one of those that we need a
How are
little
they
white
doing it
paper on.
now
The last 20 years.
yeah, exactly.
There may be a really good rationale, I just don't understand it. So, it's hard for me to support it.
1 daily work shift per week.
Even though there's the coverage, I'll call it, of the water
Yeah, they're both
funds being used
certified,
for
they're
it,
just at different
that's being
levels.
utilized to resident fees to cover the town offset. So it is kind of all the more important to consider how this expenditure is made.
Yeah.
Yeah, particularly since we're going to have a large, very, very large expenditure for replacing our water pipes in the next 10 to 15 years. They're over 30 years, and there's going to be hundreds of thousands. And so we have a very small reserve fund there, and that reserve fund needs to be increased substantially in order for us not to go broke when we start fixing the pipes. And so it's not a freebie cash thing that we can easily.
Right, right. It's important to note.
And if the person in the water department retires and loses a license, well, let's pay for someone else to get a license. I don't, you know, that.
I kind of have a backup question. So there's the indirect costs for water, there's the SCADA system that's 150,000, and then this new staff. Are these all new, or were they on the radar screen before this year? I don't recall hearing about some of these issues. I know indirect costs came up from Patty.
This is right, Patty
was
started
new.
that, and the additional staff, I believe, was a result of roll-off of debt. So that's what he wants to do with that additional.
And the SCADA, was that on our radar screen before, that we have these copper wires that are bad?
You mean in previous capital requests, if it was?
Yes, I just don't, there's a
you remember
couple
hearing
big
this
ticket
last year?
items with water, I just don't recall hearing about them before.
The SCADA's been on the CIP for several years now, but it was at that original $50,000 rate, the 150 with now we've got the notification that
Yeah,
the cost
okay.
lines are going
Yeah.
down and increased, but it has been on the capital plan
Okay.
for at least 2 fiscal years.
All right, thank you.
It's a side comment for Jackie, Chris, and Anthony, that you can spout figures off the top of your head.
Oh, that's
It's
good.
pretty impressive.
Yeah.
There's
So,
so
thank
many
you for
figures.
that.
So where are we leaving this? I'm a little, are we just not supporting it?
It feels like support is lukewarm.
That's
Well,
the
the
way-
one question is he going to fund this himself through water rates?
Well, it's ultimately usage fees from residents that would fund it.
I
That
don't-
are
And
freed
it-
up because the debt is paid off.
Instead of, he's asking, instead of that debt that's fallen off, instead of putting it in a capital reserve fund, like
As
we
Jack
did with
said.
that other 35,000,
Yeah.
he wants
Yeah,
to
to
use
Jack's
it
point.
for a new employee, instead of building up the reserve.
And what's it in here as? Coming off, the debt coming off, or with the With the new
In
employee.
this thing right here has
five-pager?
the new employee.
Okay.
He's-
Yeah, the new
It's all in there right now.
So-
Well, this is not a year for adding personnel. I'm not too thrilled about the idea. It sounds like it's maybe too
He's-
much redundancy if
He's funding
if
the
it's
debt this year at
actually needed.
35K again?
20, the debt falls off
Yeah.
in 20.
Yeah.
So he was gonna have that extra, like 70,000 in debt that's falling off that he was gonna go to the employee.
But he
With
would still be
salaries.
funding the reserve fund. He's not taking that off. He's
No.
still doing that. I don't have a problem with it.
Well, the reserve fund would what fund's the reserve fund? A fixed dollar amount each year, or just revenue generated by
That was
fees?
that 35,000
That's
article.
right, thank you. Yep,
That he's moving out of his operating budget into his
Right.
capital reserve.
right. That is a fixed dollar amount annually?
Yes, and this is the second year of it, or the third year. FY '20 was the second year.
Those encompass the debt that previously, and
Yes.
the user
That was the
And-
previous
and
debt was rolled off that he put
Right,
in.
water
capital.
fees and expenses.
I don't think they've made a compelling case why we need to add another person. That's all I can say. It's,
I agree with that.
So maybe we say, does a new app help with the second person on the 150 grand system take the place of another person? I think that's where Jack's along the same line. If we're providing more access to the system and remote monitoring, maybe he doesn't need it.
no, we need,
So, yeah, we'll find out next week, I think,
I think we
right?
need
We're
details
going
on
through-
both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, we need to learn a lot more about what the benefits are that, other than replacement of it.
So it feels like there's not a lot of support from the selectmen,
No.
but
I
you have
might
more
change my
discussion, so that are going to get more information.
All I'm saying, right now, he hasn't made a compelling case, and I'm not in favor of it, but, we can always change our mind, but that's where I'm at right now.
Right, well, I think we expect at least some information related to the proposal, the estimate that was given, right, for the SCADA system. And I think I'm feeling like we need to revisit the additional hire
So-
as well.
I'm sorry, I'm definitely getting, I don't know. Is the money for the additional hire in this budget?
It is in there.
Okay. So we could actually lower this a bit, but
Theoretically,
But it's
yeah,
their money,
sure.
so to Jack's point, what he was saying is if we reduce that staff, Jack had said it makes, I don't want to speak for you, but I think you said put it in the capital stabilization fund.
right.
Instead
Or
of-
could they reduce their fee schedule
Or
as
could
well?
reduce the
Mitigate the
fees.
impact of the indirect costs to water, to residents?
Yeah.
Suppose that's another option?
I mean, I would think they could balance, you could do both. You could partially offset the increase of 95,000 to the town in indirect costs and add more than 30, go from 35 to 50,000 towards capital. I'm just making up numbers.
We also have an equity, everybody in town wants more people in the department. HEW, everyone does. It's just because they haven't asked for it, doesn't mean, and so I think we have to be able to look ourselves in the mirror and say, look, we only added one person here, and that was the water department. There was really a compelling need to add a person in the water department. And I'm sorry, the finance department, HEW, and this is not your year. Just because they held up and listened to our tale of woe in the budget, and they didn't ask for more people, let's take that into consideration. That's my point. I mean, Bill Tye could ask for two people, make a compelling case for at least one.
Can.
Yep, well said.
I'm good. Do we have to vote? Or we're going to wait till next week, I think, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think there's the possibility then of is it 65,000? Is that the amount?
For
The additional staff
The additional
request?
staff,
the
that sounds about
additional
right.
staff was, I was just looking at that,
Including
With,
fringe.
with benefits?
47,000 plus about 23,000 for
The highest
benefits.
possible,
So
The highest possible family plan, yeah,
Right.
like the GIC,
Yeah.
PPO,
about
right.
70,000.
70,000.
So
Because
it's pretty much was gonna, his debt coming off is 70, I think 75 with interest. So it's pretty much washing the debt coming off.
So he's replacing the debt service with an employee, and this is, just reminding myself, this position will be fully funded out of the water department revenues.
it would be.
Which are our fees that we pay.
Yeah, which are
Well,
going
with the
up.
rates that we pay.
Which are going
I
up.
always, just, it sounds like it's like this amorphous.
No, I
pile of
understand, but
money.
it's coming from a separate source and not the,
Right.
Not the
not
operating
the,
budget.
not the real estate tax base.
Not funding it would not reduce the potential override.
Right.
It would, however, in a holistic sense, show
It's more money out of our
an
pocket.
effort to reduce overall expenditures.
I understand, yeah.
And it would
Still the
be
same
really
person.
the water commissioner's decision, right? Whether they chose to use the 70,000 to put in their reserve fund or use the 70,000 to offset the, no?
No, I think it's your decision.
Okay,
They decide water rates.
The
You
capital
decide the
expenditure.
expenses, how they spend it.
okay, great,
It's not a complete enterprise fund.
okay. I'm good with that.
How long has that 35,000 policy been in place annually? Towards capital?
I believe it started in 19, so in
Okay.
20, there's 70,000 in there now.
Another thing to consider is if the reserve fund is like $300 and something thousand, but if the scatter
Scatter
system
thing.
goes through, that's going to reduce their
Yep.
retained earning of reserves to 150,000. So in the event that something did happen, there's only so much in our reserve fund that we'd be looking to reimburse, so it just makes that much less cash available on hand.
I'm just trying to think about all the moving pieces. Did the 94,000 that we're gonna get from indirect costs, that probably got used up really quickly? Like, that didn't create any relief?
Well, it created 94,000 of
Operating.
revenue relief immediately.
Right.
I know, but I'm just trying to see where,
Top of page 5,
Top of page 5, yeah.
reduction in
Water indirects, general fund decreased due to the water.
Okay. It's at 84 and change. 94. 94 and change.
Just looked at water.
so I'm trying
you
to
say
figure out all
water?
that big increases are.
I was looking.
Are you asking that 94,000 get redistributed into
Yeah, I'm trying to see where all the big
other
increases are.
expenses?
towards the
Yes.
overall budget.
Looking, I couldn't
It
find it.
got redistributed
Yes.
in the in fact,
Yeah,
I
we
think you
did-
said it
Yes.
got redistributed into the town hall budget.
Runs the bubbler.
But, no, overall budget, general fund. Schools, town, everything,
Yeah, so I'm just trying to
right?
put that in the context of what all our big increases are, year-over-year change.
So it's factored in,
IT,
So a lot of those, so a lot of that 94,000 is like salaries, finance salaries, town administrator salaries.
Yeah, we have a spreadsheet, Carrie, that
so
we
our
can...
total general government increase is 95,000. So it's basically,
yeah, it's revenue. It's like,
I know, I was just trying to figure out where that revenue, where the chunks of the revenue went.
So it was broke up, I think it was to say like 43,000 was going to offset finance salaries. So that's not going to go back in to reduce finance salaries. That's just going to come in the next round.
exactly, there's an attributable component to it that stemmed from the analysis that you guys did to figure out what your percentage split should be. But the impact is just counted as revenue like any other, right? Yeah. But not technically tax revenue that would affect the levy. It's like,
It's really just, we're paying it, it's really just offsetting our expenses that we pay for.
Expense
It's
offset.
showing- it's not- Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So it doesn't show up anywhere as revenue.
No, but the general
Right.
government increase in FY '21 is 95,000, so it's kind of,
There's no...
general,
Is it,
you're saying, is it not
we get
coincidental?
90, well, no, I mean, I didn't assume it'd be coincidental, but like, we get 94,000 in relief
Right,
from indirect costs being paid.
yep.
And then the general government, it's absorbed roughly, I mean, money's fungible, and total general government is going up by 95,000, so.
Yes. What line are you looking at, the C plus 95?
Page 2,
Thank you.
two-thirds
two.
down on the page.
Yep. Yep. Which stems from all departments.
Yeah, and you can see where all the increases and decreases are.
Right. So am I correct in assuming that that is coincidental?
Very.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, money's fungible, but you can
Right.
just see where it's absorbed.
You can see how
could
that
argue
effect,
it's
the effect that it has.
It's
Yeah.
absorbed equally and proportionally across the entire set of expenditures unless it's allocated. That's how I view it. It's just
Yes.
to the general fund.
Yep.
But it does align with that in magnitude.
Yeah.
Which isn't here nor there. It makes sense.
Yeah, right.
We have that relief.
Right. But it would only be reasonable or like rational from that standpoint if we only started, if FY '21 is when we introduced these services indirectly provided to the water department, if you were suggesting that there was a direct offset, which I know you're not.
Oh, right, yeah.
But in terms of an incremental year-over-year
I'm just
increase.
stepping back and looking at the overall flow of money.
Right,
And there's 94 in relief, and
yep.
where does it flow to? Anyway, we can move on. I was just,
Is there a need to vote on the additional staff? That's a question.
Good question, Mike. We haven't really voted on a couple of these where we feel like additional info's owed. Is that right?
So on this one, we're asking for additional information?
Can he,
I don't think they've made a compelling case for why we need to add one person to the water department. If they can make a compelling case, we'd like to review it, but absent that, I'm not in favor of it. I'm speaking to myself, not for the other two selectmen.
And if we're of,
I would agree with Jack's analysis.
can he include that discussion next week when he comes to present to us?
yeah. And then to
then
Mike's
we can-
point, we would be voting at that time to either continue to include or remove
Yeah,
the additional
Yeah.
So we're deferring.
water
then.
department budget. Yes. I think that's right.
Along with a compelling case for why we want to spend $150,000 for this.
Yeah, more info on
Right.
SCADA.
Scatter.
I have that printed on
I was
T-shirts.
advised we had an open meeting law violation, which no one filed. Who the hell knew what SCADA meant for the general public? We have to be articulate enough in our agendas so the general public can understand what we're talking about. That was not enough of information, but we got to pass on that.
Oh, you were told by
Yes.
somebody that, okay,
Yes, and I
Interesting.
agree, we agree with that person as well.
okay. Well, acronyms are
We'll be a little more
tricky.
descriptive in the
There was a
future.
snafu about SCADA. Thank you for laughing.
Very funny, Carrie, very funny.
Some people pay attention to
Is
this stuff.
snafu an acronym?
Yeah.
Really?
Situation normal, all fouled
That's the
up.
last
Yeah.
What is it?
Emphasis on,
Situation
on the
normal,
fouled.
all fouled up.
Oh, I'm sorry, did I skip a step?
I thought you did that.
No,
override. Let's go.
Oh, yeah,
Kind of the same idea, just a little,
fouled up.
yeah, a little edgier.
Can I just make a point that came up right at town meeting last year by a town meeting member and a former finance selectman? Our overall total general government is up 7%, 7.1%. And I think we need to be prepared to talk about what drives that 7%.
Good point.
Yep.
Yep.
I think you're
IT,
just the man to do it, George.
legal and IT went way up.
Legal and IT are the main.
But we should be prepared, I mean, to say what drove legal,
telling you how
what
to
drove
respond to it.
IT.
Because
Joking
we're,
aside, I agree.
Yes.
you know, people are going to say, well, the schools went up 9%, and why?
Right.
And we can expect the same question, you know.
And is this, we don't have to talk about this now, but why did legal go up so much? I know I missed the big Super Saturday.
We've been under budgeting. We've had to use a reserve fund transfer every year
For
to
legal,
fund
right?
for legal in the anywhere between 10 to, I think it was even 35,000
So you're
a
just
couple years
front-loading
ago.
what we've already been spending rather
Yes.
than the actual
Asking for a
costs are going up?
Well, you don't, it's tough to predict as well,
Yeah.
given the nature of the litigation,
The billing
the
The
unexpected
litigious
nature of it.
nature of our,
So
You know, look at this
historically-
year, we started this year and needed a $49,000 reserve fund transfer in, September? You know, when the ambulance went down, which is a good portion of our total reserve fund.
Yep.
So that was just increasing it based on prior year expenditures, some actuals going back. We've always overspent that 60,000.
okay, I thought maybe there was more litigation happening.
And, well, there very well may be, and we also ask that Anthony make judicious use of town council, as we know you do, because it's
Yeah.
expensive, but recognizing that you have to where you have to.
Or you spend
It
more
really
money
gets
sometimes.
spent on a lot of land
Or you
use
spend
issues.
more otherwise. I know.
It's land use issues that really draw
I just have to
up.
state that for the record.
No, I get you.
Well, there was
Received,
also
message
the-
received.
I know you say hello to Lauren.
You have to go to a
Next
few
year it's
more.
going to be less. The Maplewoods is winding down, and that we shouldn't, that we have an ongoing lawsuit with this B&B called Hurdle Hill. Is that what it's called? Over there in East Wenham.
Okay.
Goes on and on and on, and that, that should eliminate, we still, this ongoing lawsuit, but those two coming off the books in terms of litigation, and nothing new coming on, hopefully would mitigate next year's legal fees compared to this year and last year.
It'd be great.
The expectation.
But are you talking about general budget drivers or budget increase drivers? I mean, it's certainly more than legal fees. It's, you know, the benefits and the health insurance.
I
He's
just
just saying
mentioned
the
general
segment.
government.
Just general government,
Yeah.
okay, I see.
But you're right, our two
It goes
biggest,
up 7.1%.
Yeah, because that's like.
yeah, our two biggest drivers are benefits
95.
and trash. you know, I think benefits is what's it, over 11% or something? Or seven-
Health insurance too, right?
Health insurance, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
13.5. for
13, and
benefits.
then trash was up 11%, I believe,
Yeah.
Yeah,
overall.
11.
Yeah.
Jim has a good point, though. I think we should put down the major drivers that are contributing to the 7%.
Yep.
If somebody asks, what's going on here, you could have a piece of paper in front of you and say, well, this, and this.
Right.
What have we done about it? Yeah.
All contributed to what percent of that 7%? Which we had no control over. A good point.
7%?
Yeah, and I think we have to be talking about dollars and percentages, too.
Right, because you do just look at percentages,
Yeah, you know,
Oh, trash.
the trash at 11% is 45,000, but
This is just general government?
There was
And then
something.
highway at
we total public safety,
5.6% is 56,000.
Right.
Public
So-
Works, and that's where trash is.
Yeah.
You have a big percentage increase with a small dollar.
Small
Right,
dollar amount.
Right.
Well, we're not adding people, so that, you know, there's no people being added here.
Right.
We're not giving large salaries.
I always hated percentages.
Right.
Not lately.
It can look huge, oh my God, but it's,
That's right.
These towns.
That's been a long time.
And that IT was mostly around a regional IT assessment upgrades, so that was 40,000. Illegal, that's.
I get a stipend.
I'm not asking you to explain it here necessarily, I'm just pointing out that.
Real good question.
It's gonna
And
be
to
a-
Anthony's follow-up, trash is not included in that. You know, if you're looking at that 7.1% general government,
Yep.
right, that's a separate line item. But then you got to take into account the magnitude also,
Okay.
which I know you're aware of, like, you know, the percentage increase on a large or small dollar base relative to the other.
Stock trash.
Stock trash.
Yeah, I'll be happy to give my thought on that.
Talking trash.
Ron,
Trash talking.
So Jack and I were having a discussion today, and I said, what if we just did a non-binding warrant article to take the temperature about implementing trash fees and how that can affect next year a reduction reliance on the tax, on the levy. So instead of needing to increase that rate, we're just now going to use trash fees. So, and hope to keep that tax rate down.
Can I get a couple minutes? I don't talk much, so I just wanted to walk through the math, and I'm going to use simple math just so I can start. And do you have a chart you used where you said, you know, 100,000 a year? Okay, so I looked at it, and we say, give or take the math. I'm looking at the FY21 tax rate increase Excel spreadsheet that Chris did. So if I look at $1 million, give or take where we are right now, right? How many homes, taxable homes?
Oh, 1,400.
All right, so if I take 1,400, okay. So if we take $250,000 of trash fees, divide that by, divide 250,000 by the number is $178 per. Per home. Yeah, per home. Does anyone follow that math? So far?
Yeah.
So we have $178 a year. Divide that by, we'll just make it 180 to make the math, right? 52, that's $3, and again, rounding, $3.50 a house per week for trash. So if I take the $1 million levy limit here at $956, reduce the levy limit to $750,000,
The increase in the levy.
the increase in the levy. So I take 956 in the last column, subtract 974. It's $162 per, to the average person. So roughly a $250,000 per year trash fee to the town works out to almost going from a $1 million override down to a $750,000 override. And if we have the median first of all, does everyone follow my thought process so far? So if we have the, if we have the 575,000 median per house, and we take the Wenham Pines houses that are going in there now, right, around 800, they say they want to do 900, 8 to 900,
Yeah,
a million?
who knows?
Well, they're a million now, they want to drop
Why
it
does
down.
that, why are you bringing Wenham Pines in?
Because I'm trying to get how much a new house is going to come in
Oh,
at.
the new growth piece?
Yeah.
Oh.
No, so if the median house is 575, but new,
Haven't sold a single one yet.
Yeah, I wouldn't
all
worry
right, so if you
about-
use Dodge's Row,
Dodge's Row, if you're going to talk about something concrete, Dodge's Row. And I don't think we're even picking up trash from Wenham Pines,
Yeah, I don't think
actually.
okay, so if you have.
I hold it all constant, market value, because it'll change
Okay.
anyway.
So if I take if I double the median assessed value, that works out to 162,
Boulder Lane, we don't pay for either.
pardon?
We don't pay for Boulder Lane.
Or the boulders.
The boulders. But we have 1,400 houses. I'm just trying to get the math.
So I guess what's the, I'm trying to, so what, yeah?
So my end result, if I'm doing the calculations right, a tax fee saves new houses, a trash fee in the long run is less money per certain households than a tax hike.
Certain households, certain households.
Correct. So if I
Right.
take the median of 575, it works out to a $16 difference between a tax override and trash fee,
With the tax override being higher?
with the tax override being $12 higher,
Right.
from the million down to 750. So the reason why I think we should consider this strongly is when you go and when you look to move out of a house, you look for another house, when you go to Redfin or Realtor, you look at the taxes. So our tax rate is public, fees are not.
Right.
So when we look at the longevity of the town, I'm agreeing with the tax, the trash fee is a good way to supplement our override need. But in the long run, I think it actually saves money for a portion of the town. And if you're asking me as a person in Wenham to pay $3.50 a week for trash pickup, to me, that's a no-brainer. So I think when we look at the trash, we don't have to think in small numbers. I think we have to a little bit bigger, because the math says it's almost a break even. And then for those houses above the median, it's actually going to cost them less to have trash pickup than the tax override that we have right now.
You need to
But
pay
the
for
houses that are
pay
bo-
for the trash pickup privately.
Private, correct. So for instance, if you have $1 million home, right, it's going to cost you, and you lower the override, it's going to cost you
More in the override than in the
more in
private
tax.
pay.
Correct.
The point too, Dave, is that it's going to compound on the tax rate where a fee does not.
Correct. So it gives us more limit in future years, because again, when you look at houses, you can see nearby towns, oh, I can afford a little bit more of a house somewhere else. I can get maybe another bathroom, another bedroom, but the cost of the house might be more, but the tax rate is low, so it evens out a little bit. So I would really strongly suggest that we look at trash fees at a higher amount than we were looking originally at 50 or 100,000, because again, in the long run, it lowers the override that we have, gives us more room for future years, and the week-to-week cost is not a big deal. If we round it to $5, included as part of the water bill that we spoke of, or maybe have it be different, anything that can lower the tax rate significantly, I think we should explore.
Can I play devil's advocate on one item?
Pardon?
Can I play devil's advocate on
Of course,
one item?
this is,
So, I'm now sitting in the audience.
yeah.
My question is, do my taxes pay for trash fees today? The answer is yes.
Correct.
How much that is, I don't know.
It's
And now you're asking me
440.
to- Wait a minute, and now you're going to levy another fee on top of me.
Right.
Is that correct? That's just a question.
Yes, so it would be a new fee, but less taxes for the override.
Gotcha.
So
Higher,
yes,
still higher taxes, though.
still higher taxes at a lesser amount. So instead of again, rounding, right now it's 956, around 1.1, so the difference might be more. It might be closer to $1,000 estimated tax increase. So if you go 1,000 down to 974, that's $306. that's less than $5 a week to me for trash pickup.
So David, are you saying that if you're going to buy a new house, and you're deciding between two houses, you're going to base your costs, or what you think your costs are, only on the tax rate, and you're not going to look at what other fees you might have to pay in order to live in that particular house?
No, I'm looking at, that's an excellent question. So, no, it's advertising for a town. So we have to look at I'm worried about, at this rate, we have 3 more years before we're at the max Massachusetts tax, right? So I'm looking at longevity of town and resale of our houses. So when we advertise a town, we have great schools, great people. You know, I'm here for the long run. So I'm trying to see in a long run view, what is something that, one, doesn't have to go before a town vote. We can always raise trash as needed, right? We do want want the public to opine on it. But at the end of the day, if I look at a house at X amount, what's public in the advertising of my house for sale is the taxes, excuse me. That's wrong, incorrect English. So if I have taxes at, now my house is roughly $26,000, $27,000, my taxes are gonna go up significantly over the next couple of years. I look at it, say, for resale value of houses in our own homes, trash can offset a lot of the overrides and save money that we can use for future years. And I think the fee of $3 or $5 a week is, in the grand scheme of things, is not bad. And for those above the median, it saves them money in the long run.
I think it's an excellent
My
analysis.
thought. What?
Totally agree. We're gun shy on the trash fees, basically.
Yeah, because, I guess I can't stay quiet here anymore. I'm trying, I'm really trying. So it's not.
I'm glad we're polite to each other.
talk about it, right?
Yeah.
It feels, so 2 things that occur to me. Your point may be true mathematically for people who are buying and selling houses, but we have the issue of the people who are going to be in the room and the people who live here now are actually making the decisions. And it's a little bit of a hard sell to say to folks, we're going to increase your taxes, we're going to give you there's going to be an $800,000 override. And by the way, you're also going to have a $300 or whatever it is fee for your taxes. I wouldn't vote for that. I would say, you're just trying to find a different way to, you know, for me to get money so that you can put more in the, you know, Article 1. So I think there's that problem. And the other thing I guess I have with that is that it's not equitable. When you pay taxes, you know, real estate taxes, you have a smaller house or a house of less value, you pay lower taxes. When you have a trash fee, at least the way I'm understanding it, no matter how small, big your house is, you're paying the same. So it's a bigger burden on people, perhaps, that have the smaller house, that have less money, that, you know. So I'm sorry, I just have never really agreed with the notion of fees. I don't think it will be popular. I think it's a little disingenuous to say, I don't mean to say that you're disingenuous. I think it'd be hard for me to say, well, we did this because we didn't have to go to town meeting.
No, I think...
You know, we hear that a lot, and that's true.
The challenge for the community, talking about both these arguments, is I don't see trash fees going anywhere but up.
They've become a wild card. You're
Well,
absolutely
I don't even think it's wild anymore. I think it's a readable card.
Well, it's very out of control, and we don't know where they're going to go.
And we don't, well, wild card meaning how far can it go up?
Right, exactly.
And, you know, we had that chart. I'm sure it's in my mess here someplace.
I tried to find it.
I'm not going to even try. That delineated, you know, if you did X, Y, Z.
So a $100 fee a year would generate $140,000 of new revenue.
It would seem to me maybe we transition into this trash-free business, because I think your argument is somewhat compelling. It is going to be a difficult argument. I would grant you that, absolutely. And it's kind of like, you know, the leaves.
Right.
Yeah, there's no... But it's going to cost the homeowner one way or the other. What is the most flexible and what's the most reasonable? And if we're going to be up in the $1 million range, you know, we're going to be at 22 bucks a mil.
Right.
But again, that's just a number, because if we're in the 800, and you did the math very well, which I wouldn't be able to duplicate, but if we're in the $800,000 override range, plus 150 in fees, it's $12 difference or something? So it's kind of a, and our taxes are always going to go up. The other thing I think about an override is it permanently increases our levy limit, which fees don't. And part of the issue that we have in town is that we need more levy capacity. So you want that? I feel like that's a longer-term solution.
But one of the items we were all kind of asked to look at was to look at forms of revenue. So here's just one of them. I disagree with you, but, I mean...
It's not new revenue, though. It's collecting it in a different way, right? This is not new revenue.
Yeah, it's kind of replacement. It's switching it from one side of the rolls to the other.
That's maybe an argument for it.
I think there are lots of good arguments to be made in support of and not in favor of trash fees in general. I agree, just at a very high level with what Jack said, like, we probably are gun shy. To strip us out of the context of FY21 right now, just in general, I think it's, and Anthony, I've had this discussion, I think it's reasonable to expect residents just across the Commonwealth it's commonplace probably to share the burden of the trash cost, which has just gone through the roof, in the form of a sticker, a check once a quarter, every 6 months, whatever, with a reasonable amount, and that's subjective. So whatever that may be. And that could cover a portion of the trash fees, it could cover all the trash fees, whatever. And it could go up over time or it could remain constant. But I think the challenge is the point at which we're in right now, where we had 331,000 FY19 override, 499 FY20, up 51%. $1,095,000, 1.1 million, up 120%, up 119% over last year. So we're not going to fee our way out of it. And the astute resident would ask the question, fine, if I give you, I'm just going to round to call 100 grand. If the residents give you 100 grand in fees, can you guarantee me that the override is going to be 100 grand lower?
No.
Well,
just freeing up space.
So, because we're at the tail end of the process, we could basically say, yeah, we got everything figured out, so it's going to be 100 grand lower. Going forward, however, now we have theoretically an extra 100 grand of levy capacity. We're going to chew that right up.
Yes.
Exactly.
Because
Like
we're levy constrained.
Water fees.
Because the schools have increased massively, 27% in 4 years, from 30 to 39 million. So, in gross operating budget, 4 years, 27% exactly. So, and that's half our budget or a little more. And other reasons too, other expenses have contributed to that. So I'm cognizant of the resident saying you're going to get the same money either way. Yes, there is something to be said for keeping it off the tax roll because it's a permanent levy increase.
That's the goal of it.
I'm with you on
off the tax rate, and it gives us more room for future years. It's going to go up every year. I interrupted you.
But no, it's fine. I'm with you. It just doesn't address the longer, larger structural issues that are playing out in it.
I don't think those are going to get solved in the next year.
That's fair.
To be honest, and
fair. Of course.
It's a
it's a reset year.
It's a shell game. Bad term, but you're taking from here and giving it to there and taking from here. But the goal of the tax rate, and if the math works, it's cheaper for the residents, or a good portion of the residents to have this done. But I'm not suggesting we go, and your argument's good, go do this behind the scenes or not in a town meeting, but we're running out of capacity to do this. We are going to be roughly 20 and a half, right? We have 2 to 3 years before we're done. Excuse me, I'm using the wrong word, level of capacity. Our tax rate is just continuing to go up. I am just trying to make suggestions of how we lower our tax rate, and it is paying it in different ways that really is not permanent. fees never go down. They just don't. So I'm thinking this could be a way, it's cheaper for a portion of the population, and it keeps our tax rate down. And that was just my thought. So as a member, it's our job to try to come up with different ways to do this. And it's cleaner just to have another override amount and just have it vote and go to town. I think that's a very clean way. I think residents like loose leaf pickup, I would bet no one's going to vote not to have it. I think no one would want another fee, but I'm just trying to find ways to reduce taxes, our tax rate. So I'll end my soapbox on that. Thank you.
I'd like to suggest a straw vote, just a straw vote to find out how everyone feels. Only a couple of people have spoken. What do you think? I thought he made some compelling arguments.
I have a comment that's before I make a straw vote. I am 100% for user fees for something like trash, because I think it's a useful way to address whoever generates the most trash pays for it, although I don't know what fees, we've talked about different fee structures, if it's a flat fee, say that 10 times fast, across the board, or if it's tiered based on how much you generate. Either way, I still support user fees. In the context of this year, however, with the water rates going up, other things that tangibly, practically affect residents' daily and weekly lives, I am comfortable postponing fees until another year. Because we have the loose leaf, we have the water fees, what else? We have other things that are, the other thing is just the tenor of conversation in Hamilton about fees. It's a very hot button issue, and why do we want to bring that here right now?
There's something to be said for that, the political capital piece of it in light of everything else.
Yeah.
And one thing, just to your point, Carrie, I know you've made the point before that anything that reduces, like the generation of trash, right, causes people to generate less trash. That's all good.
Or generate as much as you want, just pay for it.
The whole thing is inherently unfair as it stands now. If I live across the street from you and you put out one little lightweight, hefty bag and I'm dumping 100 pounds into my black bin, that's what the town is paying for. That's what you and I are paying equally for on our assessed value. So there's absolutely no way that it's done fairly to begin with. So I just point that out because there's no way as a result to go after without a structural shift in the way that the whole thing is done with like bags, paying for bags, and I'm not going there personally. I don't support that.
Thank you.
No.
I'm with you on that.
But to make it truly fair, or to have a scale on the back of the truck when they pick it up and say, oh, Beacon's up, 80 pounds this week, or whatever, you know what I mean?
I'm only going to pick up 50, leave the rest.
Yeah, I know.
It's like a bag at the airport.
Right, exactly, on the scale. So to that end, it is unfair as it stands. Just structurally, that's how it goes.
Were you saying, Alex, that you think, and Catherine, that the bag system that we have, that green bag system is unfair?
No,
No.
take those off the table. Whatever color bag you put in your black bin.
Oh, in your black box,
Right.
oh, okay.
If you hold everybody's assessed value constant in town,
Yeah.
the one thing that remains as variable is the weight of their trash, and that isn't constant. So we're divvying up the bill equally in that case when I generated three
Right,
times the
right.
weight
No, I
of
get
trash,
that.
and that's how they assess
But
the
in
town.
some ways, I mean, I'm just, we do have that, we have an existing pay, hybrid pay program now.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you go down to
It's more,
CVS,
you
or
have to
you
get
get your
a
green bag, and
Bags are just stuff the black thing, they don't close it.
wrapping paper at Christmas is what I use.
I think if you have an extraordinary
a
amount
year.
of trash in any week, you do have to go out and buy whatever it costs, extra bag. So there is some element of, if you're using beyond the black bin, you do
Right.
have to pay more.
you have to pay more. So that's not a new element.
Right.
But very few of my neighbors in my neighborhood, I don't see that many green bags out there.
No, I don't either, but I see them. They're out there, people do use them.
But in terms of covering costs, recycling costs are what are going up, and that's exponentially, and that's free. Or covered by.
It's covered by our
It's not
existing
covered
rate.
by the pay-as-you-throw hybrid. That's covered by the revenue. Anyway, we don't have to deliberate anymore.
So straw poll? Is that what you're
I
saying?
suggest we just do a straw poll. That's
I think that's a good idea, and I think we just need to be clear as to like whether it's something that goes before the residents, because as I've
It's a straw
mentioned,
poll. We're not buying,
yeah.
In favor of raising fees. I like your math.
Okay, so who's in favor of raising fees in FY '21 budget proposal? Is that the question?
Is the budget proposal one that would go before the town as a, like, what's the implementation, I guess, is what I'm asking?
Well,
Are we trying to
why don't we just-
pick a number?
Fee or no fee?
The implementation aside, saying,
Yeah.
David made a good case for, whether it's this year or next year or some other year. What do people think about, basically,
The proposal he's
proposal,
presented.
not necessarily to implement it this year, but just what about it?
Think of it.
If you're against it this year, you're gonna be against it next year and the following year. and the
No,
following.
I'm for fees, but not this year. There you go.
Well,
And
we're only gonna
I-
have one vote.
Yeah, and I think this year I do think this year is a different animal than perhaps another year would be for all the same reasons.
Come on, David, do the vote.
I think this year, again, I'm never married to an idea, just my wife. So as a member of the town, I try to come up with ways to try and reduce the tax rate. So whether it's this year or next year, I am for user fees for garbage. We're FinCom Padres, we disagree politely, so I think this is something we should, we consider, and I'm for it.
I would agree with fees, and I would agree that we should present the idea at town meeting this year with a full explanation as possible for '22, and incorporate this. And I think it should be pointed out, though, however, that, if you have 250,000, is it 250,000 increase? No. What's the increase? 45.
It's 45,000 from,
But at any rate, it adds to our tax base. And how do we reduce that argument, I think, should be put forward. For future income in
I
'22.
would suggest you do it this year, because
Right.
there's another shitstorm going on here.
And people are going to feel they're losing a lot already.
Right,
Yes,
right.
Okay, all in favor of the trash fees, generally speaking?
generally speaking.
Generally speaking.
Okay.
The other thought I had was, we should probably at some point, Anthony, I don't know if it'd be difficult to do, but get some comparables. What other communities, like communities, have trash fees ongoing or thinking about them in the future, so we could have some.
Yeah, Mass DEP does have that. I'm pretty sure I have that in my computer. So let me-
That's right, I think you showed it to us.
Yeah, I think I
That's right.
sent it out.
So
There's
we
all
have
different, there's the pay-as-you-throw bags, and then there's
Yeah,
the
yeah,
hybrid,
yeah.
there's a portion that you pay flat fee.
But
plus that.
generally, many communities, I don't know, are
Yes.
going towards some supplemental income to pay for trash.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, they have to, because the cost of the trash is exceeding the
Yeah,
limits within Proposition
To other
2.5.
general operations or
Yeah,
whatever.
everybody's finding it more difficult, and to Dave's point, some people do want to keep the tax.
So I
Use
think
that.
that if we're going to have that information, though, we have to be aware of where we stand relative to tax rate versus those other communities that may be charging fees.
Yep.
Because that's what whenever.
That's a good point,
That's one of
yeah.
the things that I
That's not-
hear is, we've got like the
modifier.
highest tax rate around, and
Why
we're gonna have
why
fees.
can't you pick up my garbage?
Right, so I think those two pieces of information together, and actually Dave couldn't do
We could
his
do it- we should do an
calculation without those
analysis
two
of
pieces
that.
of
This
information.
sounds like a non-binding article that Dave's going to present at town
Yeah.
meeting. He did such a great job tonight.
It's
hate the
very-
mess.
That's the
Well,
most persuasive article, that's.
I don't have a problem. I speak all the time.
No, I've gotten closer to agreeing to trash fees than I've ever been, based on that,
No nicknames.
Good
The,
job.
based on that.
Good job.
You send out your
my-
numbers to
this?
FinCom?
Yeah.
Yep, you just jot them down quickly so
I
we
think they need
can
to be refined a little bit.
peer review it and just make sure we're all on board with the methodology and comparison approach and challenge it as I would want someone to do if I came
so
up with
we
it.
are going to do a trash fees,
No,
non-binding article?
no, so I think it was, the straw poll was in support generally and not FY '21. Is that fair?
Right, but no non-binding article either, to get it.
I think it sounds like an inform, like a one-way,
It's an educational
not to
process.
suggest that it doesn't take
An
education.
I mentioned to Alex about a month ago, maybe a little bit longer, should we do like the State of the Union, the State of the State, the State of the City kind of presentations? It seems to me that the community is at a critical point with all these very difficult decisions, master plan, economic development, fees,
Route 1, traffic.
Route 1 traffic, the school budget. You know, and I don't know if you do it at town meeting, because, you know, it would be take up a lot of time, but at some point, I think we should do some kind of presentation to the community of the complexities of what we're facing for the next, I don't know,
I agree.
36 months.
That's the public outreach.
That's the budget forum, in essence, along with other supplemental topics such as what you described that.
Yeah, it's the
But part
budget
of it
forum, but I think it's also a little bit of a historical perspective, how we got where we are.
No doubt.
And what are the drivers out there that are pushing us in certain directions for these difficult decisions?
Yeah, I think it's distilling the impetus, right, behind all these discussions and the detail they're in.
Yeah.
How we got here, where we are, how we got here, where we think we're maybe going. And, I mean, we're looking at, Chris has been great about providing all the scenarios along the way. You split the difference between $1 million and $1,210,000, right? Because what are we at?
The $1,210,000 was what we had coming into today. That was our override
So
coming into
now we're
today.
at
Right, so
now we're at a
1.1.
million, right?
So I'm saying you split the difference between those corresponding rates, holding everything else constant, and tax rate projections never work out exactly, right? Because market value changes everything else. But what we know now is that we would be in the realm of $20.70 per thousand taxes.
Right.
Which is a increase in the tax rate of over 9% year over year. And remind everybody that you talk to that your tax rates aren't held to a 2.5% cap, right, year to year. It's just
And
the
I
levy
think
limit thingy.
I think, Alex, to Jim's point, none of us should be working in a vacuum.
Right.
And without a broader audience of input or agreement or straw polls or however you want to look at it, our job really is to educate, not just ourselves, but the rest of the community who has to either decide to support it or
Right.
not.
Right, right.
Because we can say that, oh, it's something that we can do, but one way or another, the community will have its say at town meeting, even if it's not something that they're voting on. So I think it is a very worthwhile thing to be talking to the community about the realities of where we are, and here's an option that has some validity, and what do you think? I'm not exactly sure how we do that. Town meeting is a great place because it's usually our largest collection of people.
But it's only about 10% of the total
I
voting
know.
population. Let's say 150 people show up.
Right, I know, it's kind of.
Party at Jim's house. Right, nice
Oh,
cocktails.
Right, if we could serve alcohol, I bet we get more people.
I heard it
So-
fall earlier. I don't-
A quick survey just for trash. It starts at $10 a week up to $45 per website.
You're anonymous.
On what it is. So right now, we're roughly 49 in the state list of the highest taxes, right? In that list that you
45
generated, that I sent you.
45, I think.
Of 351 communities.
So the current tax will put us in the top 15 in the state?
Well,
Well, you also got to figure they're also going to be moving up.
Yeah, okay.
They're
So,
probably not falling off.
and what we talk about for the tax rate that we present this year at town meeting is not really the tax rate, because it's going to use a property valuation, a total valuation that's not current. I mean, it's current now, but won't necessarily be next year.
Okay.
So when it always, to me,
That's
feels
what I
a
was
little
saying.
funny, right, that we're,
But I do think it's appropriate, given what we know, just as in the budget or in the early stages, we put in placeholders and the like, holding constant, to your point, the market value and estimations of new growth and things like that are pretty reliable in this town. You know, we have levy limit increases of $500,000 a year ballpark, so.
right.
To your point, Catherine, absolutely, like, the tax rate increase was not as high in dollar terms from 19 to 20,
Right.
right, for the FY '19,
Right.
I should say.
Right, 'cause it was a
Given the market
year and,
value
you know,
bump,
so the
measuring
tax-
list.
right,
Yeah, totally, and we should always have that big old, disclaimer, but keeping constant the market value is what it would be.
We done?
That's it. It's
Okay.
other.
Wrap it up?
Did we,
Public
we're probably done with this tonight, but did we talk about the fire truck? Is that is that a done
I think we
deal?
both said yes to it. Pumper, the second pumper?
The second pumper?
We were in support of it.
Okay.
You guys were in support.
Yeah.
And I think there was only, a question of exploring perhaps, well, at the time, when we talked about it originally, we were looking for more information. It was kind of one of those deferred items, as I believe. And I think we've gotten more information, but I think there was some question about how it could, if there were any options for the way it would be funded.
We need a debt service override for this. We don't want to put this in the capital. That's crazy. And, that we can amortize it at least over 10, probably 20 years.
That's right.
And that we don't have to,
Yeah, to eat it all at once, eat it over 4 years or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And the fire chief made, at least to me anyway, I think my fellow selectmen, a very compelling case why we have to have the second pumper. Mutual aid.
I got the information
Got
on
bands.
the band
Yeah.
payment for the 500, if we did a $570,000 10-year ban.
That doesn't get us the debt service override, does it?
It wouldn't be an override.
This, no, this.
Exclusion, it's an
I
exclusion.
thought, this was just, I didn't realize we were looking at exclusion.
I want to get it out of there and want the townspeople to vote on this so it doesn't affect our levy limit every
So
year.
Levy excluded from the levy. Is there a way to
Okay,
do this?
so
where it's
that means not a
excluded from the
ban, that
levy?
means a bond.
Right.
So if you bond it,
I know it's below the million that typically is used, so
so
presumably
the only
at a
thing that
cost was there.
we could group this with, that the only pending project that we have is Longfellow Road. So we did get the funding scenarios on that. So that brings it, so that brings the total, can you see that, was it 824?
Which total are we looking at?
That one right there.
That's a huge relief on that.
Oh, then that's just that.
Yes.
This was
So
the
this is a
85.
total of 812,450.
Yeah, you know, Longfellow Road Development.
Yeah, so if we,
Oh, yeah.
so if we
I
group
was
them,
thinking Long Meadow.
so if we group them together, the Long Meadow, so if we group them together, we'd be going out for $812,000. The only thing, to be bonding a fire truck over 20 years, probably not a lot of communities do that. They like to kind of do it in
Even if it's
10.
10, I mean,
Yeah.
But we, yeah, but
But this
Yeah,
is,
the Longfellow Road is already committed to 20 years. So if we were
Right.
going to add something and bundle it together to make it $1 million to reduce our thing. But you
well,
know,
that's the point.
20 years.
Well, yes, there's,
there's nothing wrong with 20 years for fire.
and then we can always, like I said to Chris after, we could do the 20 years, and then 7 years down the road, we're in a different financial situation, we can refinance it and cut the, right. So,
Interest rates up,
yeah.
so this would be an opportunity to parlay both of these projects in FY '21.
And interest
Make-
rates are very low.
Make Longfellow, get them.
That idea. It's very inventive. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if, just to recap, so if we
Longfellow Road.
remember a couple of years, can I just, okay, thank you. But I think it might be useful for people to hear that.
Catherine's asked-
Longfellow
Catherine's
recap
asked-
from Catherine. Do you-
I'm not clear on the Longfellow expenses.
Okay, so let me just, a very brief, high level. So the road at the, near Pleasant Pond, there's a bevy of roads that are private roads that require repair.
Oh, we voted on
Right?
this last year?
Yes,
Right.
so
Oh, okay,
we
I got it.
we've already got money apportioned, we've already got a betterment assessment, that neighbors have already agreed to it. We're going to
They're
take.
paying part of the bill, too.
They're paying it.
They're paying the bill. They're
Most of
paying
it,
their
bill. The town
except
is
for a
not carrying the
small
weight,
amount
Jim.
of the ravine.
It's all back, I got it.
So we
I know, it's
put
been a
both of
long
these
time.
together, and they pay part of the bill, and we pay part of the bill, and
Right, and we both benefit from
Got it, okay.
the lower bonding fees. Right, love it,
Up here.
love it.
Thank you.
Oh, I remember. I just forgot it.
I move to we adjourn.
Second?
we'll do this. We'll present this as a warrant article at an exclusion. Debt exclusion. Okay.
Yeah,
That's us, yes.
so it'll be on,
Just has to approve whether we do the pump or not, how we find.
I think they did.
Yes.
We approved.
We already approved the
Yeah,
pumper.
everyone had yes.
All right, so we'll,
I move we adjourn.
Second? Aye.
And we'll
That's
vote
the
on the
last
actual
slide.
article
Okay.
for debt exclusion, assuming that
yes.
comes to fruition.
Great job, David, on that.
Yeah, that was very interesting.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
I knew
Second, all in favor?
It was almost 3 hours.
Thank you.